In the evening, the city center was even more lively than in the morning, and every person had their own reason to have fun, regardless of age. It was impossible to get lost in the city because the lanterns showed the way one way or another, and if you followed them, you could end up somewhere in any case, but still be within the center. People were always hungry for bread and circuses, and even at that moment, among the many things that could attract attention, they could not take their eyes off the man who was devouring food with terrible force. Even those townspeople who were going about their business could not help but turn their attention to the one who was smacking louder than any pig. Among the calm and indifferent looks, there was only one, and this man asked the others if they shouldn't have stopped the unfortunate man. Looking at the number of plates, the stranger was very worried about the poor man, whether he would die from such a quantity of food. But the most important question was why the big guy was crying while he was so greedily devouring the food, and was it because it was so tasty? One of the locals immediately realized that the man was not from these parts if he was seeing the big guy for the first time, so he clarified that he was a fairly well-known person in Hanam. The Joker pointed his finger at the glutton and sarcastically asked if everyone knew him because of his appearance, to which the local disappointedly said, "How could one call himself a merchant after such words?" and reminded him that people should not be judged only by their appearance. So that the merchant knew his place and did not get into trouble, the man explained that he was more than sure that he had already heard about this unfortunate man, since he had accomplished an incredible feat in the form of uniting trade unions throughout Hanam. The sarcastic merchant's face changed after hearing this, and he asked again if he had misheard. But the local resident once again confirmed that it was this great merchant who made an invaluable contribution, and this same Manhwa from the Heavenly Ocean Trade Union. Suddenly a woman appeared next to the gentleman, pointing her finger at him and burping, because normal people eat 3 times a day, but he eats a 3-day supply in one go. The woman, despite the fact that the person sitting across from her at the table was almost a bear, still dragged him, calling on him to stop this madness because it was not far from death. Mr. Yong turned to the woman and, bursting into tears, said that if he stopped eating, he would continue to be haunted by that terrible day. The woman froze like a statue upon hearing the cherished words that she knew very well, and now understood the reason. The assistant silently let go of the gentleman's sleeve, and his hand flew down heavily under its own weight. Only this woman could allow herself to tell the gentleman whether he was really going to die such a vile death, falling face down in a salad. Only now did Mr. Yan turn to his assistant Yunhua, his mouth no longer full but still with tears on his face. In the dark forest wilderness, one could hear the clatter of hooves and the creaking of wheels of a cart that was transporting a merchant from one place to another. The man removed jewelry after jewelry from his hands, as if freeing himself from the visual shackles of wealth. Mr. Young's assistant sat opposite him, and he commented on what he had taken off as a feeling of the meaninglessness of all these riches. The merchant, to some extent out of a state of shame, on his own initiative began to pour out his soul to Assistant Yun about the fact that he was trying to cover up a wound that was not healing by overeating and buying unnecessary trinkets. Mr. Yong began to explain more to himself than to his interlocutor, that the pain of losing people needs to be healed by people, but he still has nightmares about that very day. The woman looked at the man with alarm and addressed him as a young master, but was unable to utter another word. The merchant was already warmed by the assistant's address to him as a young master, so he smiled kindly and took a deep breath in and out. Mr. Yong was pleasantly surprised by this address, since it had been an eternity since he had made the Heavenly Ocean Trade Union his home. And Lady Yong still called him young master and not chief merchant. The woman, hand on her heart, admitted that no matter how much time passed, the man would always be the young master of the Tianzhong clan for her, and Mr. Yong himself only at that moment noticed wrinkles on his assistant's face. After realizing how much time had passed, the merchant touched his forehead where there was a huge scar and realized that when he left his clan and found another family, Lady Yun followed him, continuing to serve, so in essence she was a family all this time. Touching Yong's scar, he felt as if thousands of needles were pricking him at the same time. But at the same time, the man clearly realized that if it weren't for Yun Hua, he would have died long ago. Memories flooded the merchant like a scorching flame, and he vividly saw the moment when the Tianzhong clan came to an end. There's nothing worse than being in a family and feeling like you despise them and that they are actually strangers to you. And the greatest hatred Yong felt towards his father, and it could only be compared with one strong feeling, and that was love. As a young master, Yong erected his statue with the words that this stone would serve in his place, and then clearly asked Yun that if his father calls him, then let him go to the statue. Not much time passed, and the young man completely turned away from his family, despite the fact that he was the eldest son in a prosperous martial arts clan. He was essentially sold to the Heavenly Ocean Trade Union in a marriage of convenience. Yong did not refuse such an unfair deal at first glance, but a few years later his Qianzhong clan was attacked by the Dabi sect. The moment of realizing his true feelings for his family came to the young gentleman only when the house burned to the ground before his eyes. Only one statue stood in the middle of the square, reminding him of the decision the young man had made without sorting out his feelings. At that moment, Yong, washing his face with tears, felt that he hated his father as much as he loved him, but it was too late to change anything. The young gentleman came close to his own statue and hit his head on it with such force that blood immediately spurted out. At that moment, only Assistant Yun ran to the master, begging him to stop, and in her eyes there was fear of the death of the last person close to her. Even if the young man did not listen to the maid, he still fell to his knees, losing consciousness from such a blow to the head. While Mr. Yong was openly admitting his mistakes to his faithful assistant, something or someone incredibly fast was approaching their carriage. There was not much time left before the collision, and no one even noticed the approach, including the coachman who continued to drive the horses. Yong himself did not know how true everything he said was, but he promised Yun that he would change to the point of restoring his relationship with his wife and even improving his health. The embarrassed gentleman scratched his head, concluding that he had had enough of grieving, so from now on he would again serve the family he had. The only problem was how cold his wife would be. The merchant also confessed to Yunhua's assistant that she was also like family to him, and these words warmed the woman's soul, and even a smile appeared on her face. Just when Yun wanted to say something like continuing to stay next to the young master, a stranger's body flew right past her through the carriage. The cart turned over and spun so that the gentleman was flying upside down, and in his head was only the name of his faithful friend. The impact was as if supersonic, which caused the cart to be pierced like a knife, leaving behind a through hole. Despite the gentleman's weight, he flew out of the carriage like a champagne cork, and after him all the jewelry he had taken off. With a loud crash, the merchant's heavy body fell to the ground and the carriage ended up turning over on its side. The one who pierced the cart turned out to be alive because he even tried to stop in flight, but the blow was too strong. The stranger was helped to stop by a tree, into which he crashed so hard that the cracking of bones was heard. When the hair was thrown back, the victim turned out to be a gray-haired warrior, who at that moment had already had all his organs torn to shreds. The fighter thought that he had at least now freed himself from his pursuers, but it turned out that they were approaching again, and when he saw this, he realized that things were really bad. The wounded man didn't even have time to do anything before several samurai with katanas were flying at him, and the first one had already reached him in a jump. The old man managed to stop the sword with his own hand, which it pierced through, and the killer reminded him that they all warned about the inevitable end and the lack of a way out. Along with the blood, words flew out of the old man's mouth about how every single fighter dared to go against him, thereby betraying him. But instead of an answer, the warrior's body was pierced by two more swords of the killers, who also caught up with him after the first. The very first killer concluded, looking into the old man's eyes, that this was exactly how the almighty Lord of Demons met his death, and after that he said goodbye to him, calling him his dear teacher. Only the old man, gritting his teeth, croaked menacingly, "May the one who looked at him now and the castle of the bloody demon be cursed if he, the ruler, did not grind up and drink his killer alive." The wounded warrior activated his power for the last time, which sent a wave of blasts through all the killers, and he screamed. He would have become known as a demonic master, if not for everything that happened behind him. Yong was lying face down on the ground all this time, and despite the screams of the demonic master and other horrors, he could not wake up after such a fall. But whoever was destined to die would die, and today it was not the merchant. So even though his head was covered in blood for the umpteenth time, he still came to and rose up. Yong didn't even think about his injuries, because what scared him most was that he saw Yun's body nearby, who wasn't moving. Looking at how much blood there was near the unfortunate woman, the merchant did not even dare to call her by name at first, because he was afraid of the worst thing that could happen. Anger took over from fear, and Mr. Yong nevertheless rushed to the person dearest to him, taking Yun's lifeless body in his arms. The merchant at first couldn't even say anything, and he didn't believe and didn't want to believe that she was dead. There was literally a moment left before the realization that death had really overtaken Yun, and a lump rose in the master's throat, making it difficult not only to say anything, but even to breathe. And so the tears burst out again. But this time they were accompanied by a cry of misfortune that tore the soul apart from the inside, and what finished it off was that nothing could be fixed. Bloody footsteps of the master, who was walking approximately in the direction where Yong was, were spreading along the ground from the tree. Falling to his knees, the old man wheezed to himself that he needed to find a new body right now before his heart stopped beating. Blood was gushing out of the master's mouth, and there was very little time left to use the spirit possession technique. The condition was getting worse with every second, and there was no longer any strength to get up. And all that was left was to think about whether the journey would really end like this in an unknown place and alone. But the fire in his eyes was able to smolder a little longer when the master heard someone address him. Yong approached and addressed the old man with a furious statement that now he had lost his family through injustice because they simply happened to be in the warrior's path at the wrong time, and asked why the hell he was fighting here. The master was silent, waiting for the right moment, and Yong did everything himself when he flew up to him and grabbed him by the clothes, shouting to say at least something, because he had now lost the most precious thing in his life. And the old man, raising his terrible cold gaze, said very quietly something about the fact that the man should not, but he did not hear. Since Yong was caught in the master's hands in time, he immediately activated the spirit possession technique before his strength completely left him. The attack on the acupuncture points was successful, and the merchant gritted his teeth from paralysis, but anger still froze on his face for the last time. Now the old man was even able to rise, feeling that he was about to pass into another body, and Yong, realizing what had been done to him, wanted to ask who this stranger was, but he could not. The gentleman collapsed to the ground, and the wounds that were already bleeding began to hurt doubly. Yong felt that he couldn't move a single part of his body, not even a muscle on his face moved, only his eyes, and he could only run from side to side. The master finally finished by saying that the big guy shouldn't have treated the wounded old man in such a tone. The gentleman regretted losing his composure, even though he knew that in front of him was clearly a master of martial arts. Sitting down next to the merchant, the master said to himself that this was the last time he would use the technique, and he would really like to live a long life in a young and talented body. But having prepared his hand with the technique, the old man realized that he had no choice, since death was closer than ever, and accordingly he would have to take the body that was there. The master began the technique, saying that even if he were in the body of a pig, it would still be better than dying irrevocably. The elder injected his 160 years of true chi into his left hand and placed it on Yong's body. And in the right hand that lay on the merchant's head was the culmination of the soul and spirit of the demon lord, after which his gaze changed. After the master concluded that he was transferring what he had in his hands into his new body and touching it, a bright beam of light appeared. The old man's body fell dead on Yong's body, and the remains of blood and equipment rose up in a disappearing trail along with the wind. The Lord was already in the merchant's body, and the first thing he did was to point his palm at the old man's corpse and twist it so that no one would recognize him, thereby trying to cover up the traces of his movement. All that was left was to complete such a terrible ritual, and the master, still controlling the old body, clenched his fist, completely getting rid of the body. The demon lord had already forgotten that he was not in the best body, because the feeling of life prevailed. Just as the master wanted to rejoice that he had completed the task, he suddenly felt that Yong was still resisting inside. The demon lord was certain that this pig should have already been suppressed by his true chi and spiritual power. But Yong now also declared that he couldn't just give up and die just because some old man decided to take his place in the body. A struggle for control over the body began inside, and Yong decided to survive at all costs and avenge his clan. The master was amazed by the man's strong will, but while tightening it, he decided that even this was useless, and Yong began to shrink. The more Yong's consciousness was drawn into the master, the more it melted and came closer to disappearing altogether. Behind the big guy, one of the samurai appeared with a sword, and there was a risk that it would no longer matter who was in the body, because death was close again. That same disciple expressed his admiration for the fact that the master was able to change his body again, even in his death throes. And now it was no wonder that the demonic followers of the three demonic heavens called him master for a reason. The next moment, the fighter said that the master's damned soul would end here and now, and rushed at him from behind. If the spirit possession technique had already been completed, then this sword would have been of no use to the master, but the student arrived in time. The wound was fatal, and this time the master was unable to escape his fate, so blood gushed from his mouth. The dark forest was illuminated by a red glow, which indicated the end of the demon lord's long life. Meanwhile, in the room of his house, a man woke up feeling a terrible headache, as if it was about to split like a ripe watermelon. The young gentleman sat up on the bed, not understanding where he was, but by the smell he determined that he was probably in the pharmacy. Looking around, the guy realized that he really was in a hospital, and besides the headache, it turned out that he was also terribly thirsty. The young man took what was standing right next to him and emptied the cup completely without even paying attention to what he drank. Only at the end did the liquid acquire a nasty bitterness, and then the gentleman realized that it was most likely medicine. Considering that the young man was wiping his lips with his hand, he immediately noticed that something was wrong with it, and this shocked him. The scream was so loud that it could be heard on the street from close to the house. The poor guy was so scared that he even broke a plate and continued to sit and look at his hands, not understanding what the hell was going on. The guy turned pale and blue at the same time, unable to understand what happened to his hands and what happened to him in general, because it didn't match up with what he saw the last time. Yoon's young assistant burst into the room shouting, "Young master," and asking if everything was okay. The girl immediately explained that she arrived as quickly as possible as soon as she heard a scream, and something seemed to break. The young gentleman jumped up and, coming up close, hugged his assistant by the shoulders, unable to understand how she was not only standing in front of him, alive, but also so young. So he asked about everything, and now Yoon was in shock. But the girl, enduring the poor condition of her master, asked if he had a nightmare again, and he, standing silently, thought that maybe it really was so. The guy was brought back to reality by the fact that he stood on a broken saucer, cut his foot, and blood immediately started flowing. Yoon immediately asked why the young master did this, and he stood and thought why the pain seemed so real. When the young man realized what had happened, he realized that he had to check his guesses and be completely sure. The state of panic covered the guy more and more, and he no longer had any intention of staying in place. Yoon ran after the young master, asking him to come back and treat the wound and not walk with her barefoot, but he did not want to stop. Yong approached the statue and froze just like she did, unable to believe that what happened to him could be possible. The memories did not take long to come back, and the young master felt a surge of heat as when he cried for his family who burned alive. The poor guy's body was shaking, and he reached out to touch the statue and make sure again that this really wasn't a dream. Feeling the coolness of the stone, the guy turned to Yunhua, and although she was alarmed by the state of her master, she reacted. Tears streamed down Yon's face, and he asked his assistant when he had erected this statue that represented his hatred for his father. Yun didn't understand what was going on or how bad the gentleman was feeling, but she replied that the statue had been erected 5 days ago. When Yong heard how much this stone had already cost here, he sharply replied that he would find out everything himself, again causing his assistant to have many silent questions both on her face and in her head. The guy grabbed his stone-like self by the shoulders and leaned his head back well. Yong repeated the same fateful action, only this time with a completely different message, which caused the blood to gush out as well, but the statue cracked. The bloody piece of stone shattered into pieces, and the young man acquired a red glow that he had not had before. Yunhua screamed in horror, thinking that the young master had either gone crazy or was about to fall down dead, but he was still standing on his feet. Gritting his teeth like a furious beast, Yong, only after breaking the statue, realized that he was not in a dream, but was actually able to return to the past, although he did not understand how. Looking at the remains of the stone, the guy realized that he had 3 years until the most important moment after which he died inside. There were 3 years left until the moment when his native clan would fall, and this was his chance to change, not only his destiny. From the outside, Yan's actions looked horrifying to everyone because they could not explain his actions to themselves, and Yun was the one who was most shocked. But the most important thing is that the young master understood that this time he would protect his people and the Tianzhong clan at any cost, even if it was his life. If you delve a little into history, it turns out that the Tianzhong clan was a fighting clan and was located near the mountain of the same name in Henan. And for a long time, several families named themselves in honor of this mountain, but it was the Yang clan that united them all. After the families united, the people of Henan gave the clan the name Yang Tianzhong, and those who still remember that time still glorify the clan. Unfortunately, the fame of the Yang Tianzhong clan began to fade, and people stopped praising it, so the prefix Yang was removed. Just over a cup of tea, there was a discussion about what the old times were like, and everything seemed completely different 30 years ago. The head of the Yongbiyang clan was confused as to why they had not produced a single martial artist after Elder Yonggu-san, who was the supreme dragon of Hanam. Sitting in the garden, the gentleman expressed his concerns to the woman about how everyone considered their clan to be just a shadow of its former self. And the most depressing thing was that they couldn't even deny this fact. The lady poured tea and reassured the head of Yang that there was still hope for the restoration of Hua Rin, who would lead them to a better future. But this didn't really help the gentleman, because he reminded him of how much his son hated him, and there was a reason for that, because he acted for his own reasons. So it was his fault that he got married too quickly, and the boy didn't have time to get over his mother's death. The wife smiled kindly and suggested that at the very least he should be patient, since the young man might just need more time. Mr. Yongbiyang continued to confess that he had hoped that time would heal the wound. But now it seemed to him that the gap between him and his son was becoming deeper and deeper, especially when he came to him and his statue stood in the garden. Head Yang asked the lady for forgiveness for being too soft and complaining too much, but his speech was interrupted by Yun's scream, who ran into the garden and sounded the alarm. The gentleman turned to his assistant, wondering what the rush was and why she was so loud, while she could barely speak because she had been running all this time. Bursting into tears and breathing heavily, Yun tried to say something like the young master suddenly did something, but Chief Yang asked her to stop crying and explain everything normally. The girl couldn't bear it any longer and started screaming, saying that young Master Hua Rin was critically wounded and was now unconscious. The guy was indeed lying in bed where he was moved after he successfully smashed the statue with his own head. In addition to the headache, the young man had a very bad dream that made him break out in hot and cold sweat. Although Rin dreamed that he was playing near his favorite waterfall, chasing fish, and his mother was sitting on the rocks nearby. Mom asked her son if he really liked this place so much, to which the little one happily shouted and added that there were so many koi fish here. The boy was very proud of himself for catching a fish half the size of himself and shouted to his mother to look, but instead of his mother's admiration, he turned his attention to her. The baby was very scared when he saw his mother lying on the rocks, and trembling ran through his body because she did not answer his call. Sitting next to his mother's bed, the son cried quietly, and the lady, meanwhile, came to her senses and called her baby in a very weak voice. The woman asked the baby to come to her and extended her hand, although she was very weak, and Rin reached out to her, wiping the rivers of tears from his face, listening to how sorry his mother was that she couldn't go catch koi fish with him. The boy hugged his mother tightly, sobbing, and she said that she was okay, so she asked her son to stop crying. And the next moment, the mother's voice changed to a terrible bass with which she told him to stop shedding those damn tears, which seriously scared the boy. When Rin raised his head, he saw that it was no longer his mother who was holding his face, but the demon lord who was now growling. What a weakling the guy was. The old man barked that he would take the brat's head for dessert and opened his mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, continuing to hold Rin with his hands. The young man burst into tears and jumped up on the bed, drenched in cold sweat after such a nightmare. The first thing Rin did was look around to reassure himself that he was at least home. The place seemed both familiar and alien to the guy, and he immediately realized from his feelings that this was his room from his youth. Looking around the room further, Rin tried to figure out what his presence here could mean. And the first thing that came to the young man's mind was to return to the past, although it was not clear how this happened. Rin suddenly felt very bitter from the memories of the time when he hated his father and renounced his entire family. In addition to hatred for his father, that period of his life was remembered by the young master as the death of the head and family, as well as the fall of the clan. One realization was followed by another, that now this is his opportunity to correct the coming catastrophe by the fact that he knows the future and therefore is already half-armed. With the desire to protect his family, which meant fighting, a power that he had never felt before awoke in the guy, and it glowed red. At that moment, assistants were talking near the gentleman's room about how he had destroyed the statue by throwing his head at it. The assistant in blue clothes waved her hand, saying that this was impossible since the young master had always been bedridden with an illness, which is why he had not even mastered martial arts. But the other one insisted that she had seen it with her own eyes. The women came to the conclusion that the young master could be possessed by an evil spirit, and as if to confirm this, Rin flew out of the room, loudly throwing open the doors. The guy was on edge, especially when he saw his assistants in front of him, who immediately began to make excuses because they thought that he had heard them, and that was why he was so angry. But Rin stood holding his head and stomach, not understanding what was happening to his body, because he felt a surge of heat coming from the lower dantian. The young gentleman was frightened by the fact that with the surge of warmth, he for some reason thought that he needed a woman, and he himself did not understand where such thoughts came from. But the young man remembered the state he was often in, that he couldn't even move properly on his feet, and everything fell into place. Rin also remembered that the energy of that old master was most likely raging within him, and that such power was too much for such a frail body, but it still spread like yang energy. The young gentleman's body writhed from an excess of strength, and he began to feel that if he did not do something now, something bad would happen. The young man rushed forward past the assistants, who were afraid that they would not have any problems now because it was still cold outside, and the gentleman ran away in such a light outfit. Rin ran faster than ever in his life, all in order to somehow cool his ardor. The young man's body was burning, and he was terribly afraid that if he didn't do anything as quickly as possible, the old man's energy would swallow him up entirely. The salvation was the place from which the noise and smell so beloved by the boy since childhood came, so he jumped off the ground in complete confidence. The guy jumped from the height of the waterfall straight into the water, leaving behind a huge splash and waves. When Rin climbed out of the cold water, steam was coming off of him, and it turned out that the cold water was just in time to cool down. Breathing heavily, the young gentleman now began to put his thoughts in order, in addition to the state of his body. The young man understood one thing for sure. He was nevertheless saved from the terrible fate of being swallowed up by that terrible old man. Rin was taken aback when he heard how, in addition to the crowd, his father was also running towards him, shouting his name. The boy looked at his father's fear of losing him, and it looked to him like some kind of dream that was very difficult to believe in. Hedyan ran into the water regardless of the temperature and shouted to his son what he was doing, but he remained silent, afraid to even move so as not to suddenly scare away his vision. But at the moment when the father took the boy by the head and said that he knew that his son hated him, Rin finally felt that everything was happening for real, while he continued to worry that he couldn't sit in such cold water. While Mr. Yang was asking what was wrong with his son's forehead and whether he was okay, the boy mentally said that he missed his father very much and began to cry. Rin was very worried that if he became affectionate towards his father now, everyone would find it strange, but his hands automatically reached forward. The young man decided that it was important for him to try to get closer to his father in a natural way, and continued to reach forward. The next moment, Rin hugged his father, causing him to freeze in his tracks. But he reciprocated the feeling and did not jump away or push him away. The guy started to say something, but the tears were flowing so hard that the lump in his throat prevented him from saying anything. But there was no need to say anything because his father was also standing and crying, afraid to scare away such a moment. Rin finally felt that he had returned, and he didn't care who was looking at them now. Because if it was a dream, he didn't want to wake up. And if their reunion was an illusion, he wouldn't open his eyes. 3 months later, the young master was sitting fishing with his younger half-brother, Yeon Ki-jun, and having a great time. Ki-jong was so happy that he was fishing with his elder brother, and he also felt like he was about to win the bet, which Rin laughed, jokingly wondering if the kid had really been fishing all his life to be able to talk about it so confidently. Having become close to his family over the past 3 months, the guy remembered very well that in his past life he had not even spoken to Ki-jong, although he had studied a secret combat technique at the time, but due to the blockage of Qi, he had fallen ill and could not do anything. Due to the health condition of the younger, the Tianzhong clan lost influence and became a branch of the Yuchi clan, and Rin had already become the son-in-law of the Heavenly Ocean Trade Union, and due to his busy schedule, learned the news about his relatives too late and was unable to help in any way. Kai asked the elder if he could refuse medication, to which he replied that he had gotten fat because of them, and the younger was surprised when Rin had managed to get fat, and the guy realized that he had almost been caught. So he rephrased that he could get fat. Ki-jun moved the cloth away from the basket and noted that he was very happy with the way he and Rin had been communicating lately. Having shown 2 baskets with different contents, the younger one smiled slyly and asked that he had won the bet. Rin's response was to shout that he couldn't lose again and throw 2 baskets from which all the fish fell out, to which Kai grabbed his head and shouted that this was cheating. The next funny moment was when Rin grabbed the baby with one hand and ran from the bridge into the water, shouting that he caught the biggest fish. Even though Kai was spitting out water because he had swallowed it, Rin was having fun, and only now he realized that the younger one was a very smart young man. As he was leaving home, Rin patted Kai on the head and mentally asked him for forgiveness for placing too much of a burden on him. This time, the guy decided that he would become the best version of himself and began to train hard every day. Rin knew that before dedicating his life to martial arts, he had to make sure he was in good physical shape. At times, the young man was worried that the demon lord's energy could do something to him again. But so far, it had not harmed him even once. And yet he still developed the habit of meditating under the waterfall every morning. When Rin finished his meditation and began to get out of the water, he noticed that someone was standing and waiting for him with a towel. His younger sister, Yeon Seolan, showed her concern for her brother by coming like this every morning and waiting for him after meditation. Rin approached the little girl saying that she shouldn't wait for him here every time with a towel, but she laughed and said that she liked how they became friends. The guy rethought that besides Ki Jong, he was also rude to Seolan, although in fact she was a very sweet girl and was always so active and friendly, and most of all she loved fireworks, so she often offered to go with her. But unfortunately, every time his sister suggested going to a party with her, Rin would rudely and sharply answer her, "Does he really look like someone who has time for games?" The previous young master once and for all told the girl never to ask him about such things again. The little girl tried twice to offer to spend time with her, and twice received a cold refusal. Rin's second encounter with her younger sister was the last time they saw each other. Unfortunately, on the way to the festival, the little girl was killed by someone, and the father personally investigated this, but after some time he was also killed. Now Rin, remembering that he had refused Seolan on today's Moon Festival, and the second time a year later on the Yang Clan Festival when she was killed, he was not going to make the same mistake. The young man himself asked the younger one if she hadn't spoken about today's Moon Festival. The little girl even had tears in her eyes when she heard that her brother remembered and asked if he would really go with her. Rin immediately replied that of course he would keep his sister company, but before that he suggested going to get her some new clothes, and she was beside herself with happiness upon hearing this, so she wanted to go right away. The young master followed his sister and looked at her as a treasure in his life, so he could no longer allow the past to repeat itself. And in order to change his destiny, and not only Rin realized that he needed to become strong enough to protect his family and return the clan to its former glory. If at first Rin trained individually, now he joined other young fighters and ran with them around the clan's territory. While the guy was running, he was simultaneously rethinking that during this period, he used to take medications and read books without leaving his room. But now the feeling of life had changed and the young man was glad of it. Even though the reason for it all was the ominous aura of that old man, which ironically gave him the opportunity to fix everything. And now Rin couldn't sit still. He wanted to move so much. And most importantly, it was very interesting to test his improved body. Someone called the young man from behind and he turned around, not quite understanding whether it seemed to him that it was his father or not. As it turned out, Mr. Yan, unable to hold back tears of happiness, went to his son with the words that he had really changed and matured. The father shook his son by the shoulders, which caused Rin to remind him that in fact the other students were seeing everything now, but he didn't care. The leader asked the young man how he felt about officially studying their family's martial arts instead of just doing physical exercise. Rin made his father happy by saying that he was thinking about starting to study, and Mr. Yang lit up even more, saying that in that case he would find a teacher. But the guy admitted that he already had someone in mind, but he couldn't answer his father's question who this teacher was because Seolan was running towards them shouting, "Brother, look!" The little girl hugged her brother tightly and beamed no less than her father after they spent time together with Rin. The head of the family sighed sadly and said that his daughter had been looking only at her brother lately, forgetting about her father, to which Seo said that it was not for nothing that Rin had chosen clothes for her and, spinning around, asked her father how she looked. Mr. Yang told Xiaolan that he had nothing to say about her clothes, to which the little girl replied that she still loved her father. At that moment, the head melted from such warm words of the little girl, and Rin, watching them, thought again about the fact that even though he was now stronger than he still could not protect himself. So first he needed to learn to at least protect himself. When the guy first thought about learning martial arts, he immediately imagined a woman with a sword. The lady trained tirelessly, regardless of time and weather, improving her techniques each time. And even now, when Rin came to the training ground, he saw a woman dancing with a sword. Dragon sword flower. Mo Bi-yoon immediately asked the visitor what brought him to such a shabby place. Rin was already glad that the master paid attention to him and therefore immediately informed her that he had a request for her. While Rin was trying to explain his situation with embarrassment, Mo thought that the rumors about the master's recovery were true. The first thing the woman thought was that she had never spoken to this pervert before, so now she didn't understand at all what he wanted, so she asked him directly what he meant by request. The guy was very nervous, so he bowed low and shouted that he would like to learn swordsmanship from Mrs. Moby Yun. Rin directly asked to become a student of the master, which surprised her, and she could not hide it. Rin waited for an answer, and at that moment Mo was thinking about how she had heard many people only repeating that the master had changed several months ago. The lady also noticed that the young man was indeed a little different from before, but this was not a weighty reason for which she would agree. In contrast to the changes, Mo still had doubts about the changes of the master, since she knew those who, despite a difficult upbringing, led an honest life, while Rin did nothing but drown in hatred for everyone, including his family. The master turned away from the student without saying anything, so it was difficult to even guess whether the answer was yes or no. But when Mo said that she was refusing to study, Rin felt for the first time some kind of incomprehensible fear that felt like a stone in his lower abdomen. The young master followed the master, asking him to at least state the reason for the refusal, to which Mo replied that she was too busy studying why the secret arts of the Tianzhong clan had stagnated. Immediately after her answer, Yun turned around to leave again and mentally asked the master for forgiveness, but she could not believe that people just changed like that. But even for this case, Rin had his own backup plan because he understood that he could be an unworthy candidate for disciple in the eyes of the master. The guy looked after the great woman, guessing that most likely in her eyes he was still a pathetic brat. Rin also remembered that in the past Master Moby Yun was uncommunicative, which is why even in the clan few people knew about her skill, but she did not try to hide it on purpose. Now Rin was aware because he had visited the future where the depth of Master Mo's combat skills far surpassed others. Considering that Mo is a professional in her field, she had not only a developed body but also sense organs, and now she heard a sound behind her. When the master turned around, she was shocked that the young master was on his knees, and this was an extraordinary case. The woman immediately ran to the young man, shouting that it was not proper for the eldest son of the clan to kneel down over such a trifle. Rin quietly objected, causing Mo to fall silent and realized that now it was really worth listening to the young man. The young gentleman continued to explain, still on his knees, that this was no small matter for him and that it was the pure truth. The boy sought Mo's consent to train because he knew that no one had contributed more to the battle against the Dabi sect than she had. But unfortunately, the teacher received the not very flattering title for a woman, Bloody Flower of the Dragon Sword, and at the same time she still continued to make efforts to restore the clan. Rin's determination to become Mo's apprentice was so strong because he remembered how she died a mysterious death after all she had bravely endured. Knowing that the master had heroically given her life for the clan, the young man simply could not allow this to happen again. Rin watched as the teacher approached him and mentally told himself that he would do anything just so that she and his clan would stay alive. At that moment, Mo looked at the guy, thinking that his behavior was really different from what it was before. To Rin's great surprise, the master said that she accepted his request to teach him how to wield a sword. The young man could not believe what he heard, so he asked again if it was true, to which Mo replied yes. But the teacher put forward one condition in the form of victory in sparring, after which she would definitely accept the young master as a student and teach martial arts. Rin was already panicking, directly saying that there was a gap between them in terms of skill, but Mo said that one touch was enough. The master saw how puzzled the young man was, so she explained that if his sword could touch her even once, then victory would be his, and added that moreover, she would not use her chi or clan techniques. Yun asked the master if he agreed to fight under such conditions and if he agreed to the conditions for becoming a disciple, but he remained silent for a while. Rising to his feet, Rin thought that he had taken up training seriously after all, so the situation might not be so dire. The guy, full of enthusiasm, agreed to fight, not even knowing a fraction of what awaited him. Rin lay on the cracked ground, curled up like a poor kitten. The young master was shocked that he was knocked out before he even managed to touch a strand of Mo's hair. It was very difficult to believe that the difference in skills was so great. Yun turned around and left, saying that she had won, and an agreement was an agreement. Gritting his teeth, Rin jumped up, grabbed the sword and rushed towards Mo, shouting that they were not finished with the duel yet. According to the conditions, there was still one movement, but on the part of the master, when she stopped the guy by simply raising her hand with the sword. Such single but deafening blows were repeated many more times, but the gentleman did not stop screaming again and again. After another blow, Rin sat down on the ground as abruptly as Mo's sword dropped into its sheath. The guy sat quietly and motionless, which made it impossible to understand whether he was wounded, desperate, or angry. Because of the calmness on the part of the student, Mo looked at him completely differently than at the beginning of the meeting. The teacher bowed in a respectful gesture, acknowledging out loud that the young master's efforts were worthy of praise. The woman again silently turned around and left, but for Yong, everything was just beginning, and his energy began to glow slightly. The demon lord's growing powers became brighter and brighter around the young man's body, and Mo didn't notice it yet. But as soon as Rin stood up and brightly exuded the chi of a demonic master, the teacher immediately felt it from behind and turned around. The teacher looked at the master's red aura, realizing that this was far from being the martial art of the Tianzhong clan. But Mo couldn't answer herself the question of what was in front of her then, and only understood that she needed to keep her hand ready for the sword. Yun shouted at the guy to come to his senses and explain what was happening, and at that very moment, he appeared next to her in a second. Mo instantly reacted and repelled the attack, but the aura did not disappear and the student simply moved to the side. As soon as the master thought that the young man was quite fast with such force as Yong attacked her in a jump, the woman flew some distance and hit the wall without even having time to put up protection from the impact. Mo was in shock, but there was no time to be distracted, so she immediately grabbed her sword. But Yong was already next to her and was swinging his sword again, which indicated a possible defeat. But the master was no longer thinking so much about losing the duel as about the threat to her life, looking at how the sword was approaching her. Grabbing her weapon, the teacher realized that she had no choice but to confront the poet, and she was ready to activate the flying sword of the Dragon Emperor of the first form. Halfway there, Mo stopped drawing her sword because she felt as if time had stopped. In complete shock, Yun watched as the sword easily touched her hand, causing her to freeze and not even able to look at the guy. And Rin, no longer being covered by the aura, smiled and said that he touched the flower of the dragon sword. The young man corrected what he said to the address of Master Mo Bi-yun, and immediately after that he fell down. The woman looked at the body of the young gentleman, who lay motionless on the ground, and there were no thoughts or words that would visit her right now. Instead of further doubts or guesses, Mo turned in the direction where she had literally been pressed a moment ago. In the wall where the master was imprinted, there was a gaping hole, as if someone had cut the stone, which was not comparable to human strength. And only then did Yun think about what the hell just happened. At the training ground, Mrs. Mo was no longer alone, but her new student Rin was training in her place. It was hard to believe that someone who just a few months ago was bedridden with an incurable disease could hold a sword so well. The technique was completed by the movement that Rin saw for the first time when he came to the site and was performed by the master. Yun stood to the side and silently watched the young master, but her thoughts still did not give her peace, throwing up more and more questions like now, because she still had a hard time believing that Rin had always been so talented. The teacher's doubts were entirely justified by the fact that the young man not only swung a sword, but learned the forms of the Emperor's soaring dragon sword and the azure bamboo sword in just a few days. The woman was also confused by the fact that for someone who had no previous fighting talent, Rin was doing too well. The guy at this time, unaware of all the master's thoughts, gave it his all, breathing heavily and sweating profusely. Rin wanted to directly ask Mrs. Mo what she thought about his performance of the techniques. The teacher was not one of those who dodged the question or lied because in front of her was the son of the head of the clan himself, so she said as it was that the young man still had not discovered the secrets of the techniques but used both methods without problems. Rin was embarrassed when he also heard that if you consider his training time, you can say that these are quite good results, and admitted that the master praises him too much. At that moment, Mo saw not just a shy young man, but something more that had been troubling her since its appearance during the first battle. Considering the energy that was in the young master, the master saw it and she had no choice but to watch. Yun decided to add to everything that had been said that the young master was studying martial arts at an incredible speed, which made it difficult for her to believe that he had recently been almost in a dying state. For the sake of complete clarity, the teacher was the first to start a conversation about the red chi that had appeared in the young man earlier. Rin immediately grabbed his head and skillfully pretended to be a dying swan, not understanding how else to explain to him what he had already said many times. The guy immediately demonstrated as an argument the results of the master's blows in the form of bumps on his head, and explained that after that, he no longer remembers much. And in order to somehow get off topic, Rin also added that only the flower of the dragon sword could allow itself to treat the eldest son of the clan like that, to which Mo did not respond. Yoon decided to act smarter and turning away told the student that she would not touch on this topic further since she realized that he was not going to answer, and this only alarmed the guy. But even after retreating, Mo made it clear to the young master that as a responsible person and servant of the Tianzhong clan, she would watch his every move. Rin again scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, as if it was not the master who was talking to him, but a nice girl, and sarcastically noted that he felt a little scared. Sitting in the evening studying techniques, Yong came to the conclusion that after using 2 recent sword techniques, he clearly felt that Tianzhong's martial art was incomplete. Rin knew that such an outcome, in the form of a missing element in the techniques, was inevitable, since their clan's martial art originally belonged to the demonic sects. From what the guy knew, it was known that a long time ago the progenitor of the Tianzhong clan was a wandering martial artist who sought justice in Hanam. The warrior received 2 demonic arts from the great master of a hidden holy cult that was neither an orthodox nor a demonic sect. At that time, despite training in demonic arts, the clan's progenitor strove to maintain his path of justice. Based on his goal, the wandering master rethought these 2 arts for a long time, and thus transformed them into the soaring dragon emperor sword and the azure bamboo sword. Although the power of demonic arts decreased during the transformation process, it was still enough to create the greatest swordsman in all of Hanam, but that was not the end of it. When using demonic martial arts with orthodox cultivation techniques, it would inevitably result in them becoming incomplete. Although the ancestor was able to reach the top, it was almost impossible to reach the highest point. Even though the great swordsman kept the origins of martial arts a secret, the truth still came to light centuries later. It was this truth that destroyed Rin's clan, because if the use of technology had been complete, it would not have failed at the moment of attack. The young master could not stand the way all his memories and the truth that he learned came together, so he hit the records with his fists. Now the most important thing was to use knowledge and skills to his advantage, which would serve as a way for the young man to correct his incomplete martial art. And on top of that, only he, as a person who had survived the future, knew what to do. Finally, there were no longer 2 people sitting in the garden drinking tea, but 3, because the son kept his family company even in this. The young man informed his father that he was thinking about visiting the Jegal clan, which would be respectful on his part. But the leader still asked what kind of business his son had in the neighboring clan if he decided to show up there after so much time. Rin explained that at the very least he had regained his health and had begun studying martial arts, which was already a good reason to visit and greet the clan, especially being the one who had married one of them before birth. Mr. Yan agreed that time had indeed flown by unnoticed, and the Jegal clan and their clan had decided to become related by agreement made before Rin was born. The father glanced at the cup of tea where the flower was floating and tried to remember the name of the daughter of the Jegal clan, after which he said Yoonggyeon, and Rin confirmed this. And the head also added that he was good friends with Jegal Yu-gyul, so he would be glad to see a guest. Mr. Yang was embarrassed when he remembered that there were rumors about the incredible beauty of the daughter of the head of the Jegal clan. Rin patiently waited for the most important moment, and then his father asked when he was going to set off, which was a good sign for the boy. But then the lady intervened, reminding her husband that Hua Rin had just recovered and that it would be better for him to hold off on such a trip for now. Mr. Yang responded to the woman's statement with a warm laugh, explaining that Rin was still an adult, and at this age, a very important part of the journey is making friends while traveling, like when he once met Yu-gyul. The wife resigned herself to the master's desire, but still gently insisted that the young man should pay close attention to his safety, given that the journey was long, up to a month, so he needed to find a reliable bodyguard. Judging from Mo's first glance when meeting the young man, she was not thrilled about accompanying the young master. But Rin reacted as if nothing had happened to those who were behind the teacher and not to her facial expression. There was no answer to the question, but instead, 2 big guys moved straight towards the guy, which even made him take a step back. The first thing that could be thought was that Rina would now be beaten for something by these 2 piles of muscles. But as it turned out, the guys were simply feeling the guy to check how good his muscles were, and one of them said that they were small but quite flexible. The tallest fighter smiled broadly, happy that the rumors about the young master's activities were indeed true, and another reported that the headman's son really did look different now. Rin realized that in front of him were those same ascending ghosts, and bowing greeted them, saying that he was pleased to meet such famous masters. The tall one, laughing loudly, also greeted the young man, saying that he had nothing to worry about since they and Mo would do everything to protect him, and the guy below expressed his opinion that the young master's body was still capable of growing. Rin, looking at Jong-wook and Nam-wook, immediately noticed how muscular they were. But at the same time, he also understood that they were skilled enough in wielding a sword to be called ghost blades, which spoke of his father's careful selection of bodyguards. For the young gentleman, there was one important point, which he reported immediately, and that was to follow him without any questions when everyone went on a journey. At first, Jong became quite serious on his face, since questions immediately arose even at this stage, which is logical. But having returned a smile to his face, the guy informed the young gentleman of his consent to the conditions he had put forward. Without delay, everyone saddled their horses in anticipation of Rin, who now considered the most important thing before leaving to properly say goodbye to his family. Seolan couldn't stop her tears from flowing, asking if it was really that important for her brother to leave them for so long. Rin stroked the little girl's head, asked her for forgiveness, and promised that at the main festival they would go together wherever she wanted. When Seolan asked again if her brother was telling the truth, he blushed with embarrassment and said that he was telling it like it is. The father and mother were very happy to see such a picture because there is nothing more pleasant than a son who has recovered both in body and soul. Rin didn't forget about his younger brother either, so he immediately turned to him after Seolan. The only thing the young man asked his younger brother for was that he would look after his family for the time being. The boy stood there dumbfounded for a moment, because at that moment he felt as if he had matured, and Rin looked at him and wondered if he had always been so tall. Kijong put his hand to his head in a salute and told his brother not to worry because he would protect their family with his life. Rin turned to his father and mother, who stood there smiling, even though tears were flowing from their eyes. Having bowed to his elders, the boy announced that he was now ready to set off on his journey, having said goodbye to everyone properly. Rin mounted his horse and led the way, going first as agreed to show the way. But at some point, Rin had to stop the horse because he heard someone shouting, asking him to wait. Dressed in her usual yellow dress, his loyal assistant and part of the Manhwa family rushed towards the master. Rin flinched from this scream because it brought him back to the past, and in fact it turned out to be a very vivid déjà vu. Suddenly, instead of the gates where the happy relatives stood, there were those who turned red from the flames engulfing the entire estate. And the carriage where the young gentleman was sitting drove further and further away from home and from his family. At that moment, Rin was also leaving and also heard Yun's cry to wait, but it was more heartbreaking. The girl barely made it after the carriage, and even when it stopped, the young gentleman did not come out to her but continued to sit coldly inside. Another maid would have been glad that such a tough person was leaving the house, but this was not the case with Yunhua, because she literally begged to be taken with him. Now the same situation repeated itself, which is why Rin couldn't even say anything at first. The guy really wanted to fix what he once did to Yun, but he didn't know how to do it. Rin had such strong feelings for this girl that he couldn't even find the words, so he froze for a moment. Zhong turned to the young master, urging him to refuse to take the girl with him, considering that such a journey could be dangerous. Yong asked everyone to give him a minute and got off his horse, after which he headed towards the humble assistant, who was ready to follow the master anywhere. Despite how determinedly the clan's son walked towards Yun, she steadfastly remained in place, waiting for his words or actions. When the assistant saw how the gentleman raised his hand to her, she was even prepared for the fact that he would hit her now and simply closed her eyes. And Rin simply leaned over and hugged this fragile person who meant so much to him, and the poor thing didn't understand what was happening. Tears welled up in Yun's eyes, but she continued to stand rooted to the spot, afraid not only to move, but even to breathe. Everyone who was waiting for the young master was shocked by his actions, but they didn't say anything and simply opened their mouths. Rin quietly told Yun that she always wanted to be by his side and thanked her endlessly for her presence, help, and support. But then the young man looked into the eyes of his faithful friend and warned her that the path he was taking could be dangerous, and now he would not be able to protect her. When Rin confessed to Yun that he didn't want to put her in danger because she was his beloved family, she was shocked. The young gentleman smiled broadly and asked his assistant to wait for him at home with his family and asked what kind of things she could handle. Yun, bursting into tears of happiness, replied that she would do everything he asked, even to the point of going with him on such a dangerous journey. But if there was such an important task for her as waiting at home, then she would do that too. Finally, everyone set off, and Rin thought that when he returned to the Lianzhong clan, a lot would change. The guy was serious about protecting his family and changing the course of events leading to the clan's fall. Rin decided that the changes would begin with him completing their martial art, after which he commanded the horse to speed up. Ahead of the wind, the young master mentally asked his father for forgiveness for the fact that visiting the Jeagle clan was just a pretext. In fact, the clan was not that far from Mount Wudong, where Rin planned to set out on his journey. The young man already knew that the secret to improving their clan's martial arts was located right on that mountain. Therefore, the young master asked the master and the fighters to accompany him without questions, because if his father found out that they were heading to Wudong, nothing would work out. When Yang opened his eyes, he found himself on the surface of the water, but he didn't understand where exactly. Rin thought that he wouldn't be able to get up, but it turned out that although there was no end in sight to the water, he was able to rise to his feet. The young man was even able to walk further from the place where he woke up, but at the same time, a strange, anxious feeling did not give him peace. There was nothing else around except water, and the guy clearly felt when something appeared next to his leg, so he looked down. Rin saw that there was a piece of board with hieroglyphs floating next to his leg, but he still didn't understand what it was or where it came from. The young gentleman picked up the cracked tablet and began to read the inscription. The young man was chilled to the marrow of his bones when he realized that this was the very sign that said Tianzhong clan. On the piece of wood that appeared out of nowhere, everything did not end, and Rin turned his gaze to where the color changed from blue to red. A memory of his house burning in flames when the Tianzhong clan fell appeared before the boy. The most terrible thing was not that the huge house was burning right in front of the young man, but that it was quite realistic, and the building began to fall towards him. Rin rushed to run further from the place where the house had already collapsed and could have buried him under it. The next moment, the flame took on the appearance of that same demon lord who, baring his teeth again, shouted at the guy that he was a fool. Rin screamed because he stumbled and fell, and the old man's hand with claws as sharp as knives was already thrust at him. The demonic master's eyes glowed like two hot balls, and he scolded the boy for wasting his time on childish games after he had taken advantage of the greatest opportunity that was contrary to heaven. Rin spoke to the old man for the first time and asked how he could still be so strong and know his steps. But the master cut the guy's question off halfway and barked in a fierce voice that he would not be able to change anything, no matter how hard he tried. Just as the master wanted to say, "Give him the body," Rin saw that his face was allowing the sword, and instead of his voice, Master Po appeared with a question about what the master was thinking about during their sparring. Waking up from one terrible vision, Rin froze, looking at another, namely how Yun was flying at him with a sword. Automatically, the guy managed to put up a defense with his sword, but this moment was missed because his attention was not yet with him. Although his body obeyed, the weapon flew back. The teacher now forced the young master to finally wake up with a real sword, putting it to his throat. Rin immediately made it clear that he was already here and could hear and see the master, so he immediately said that he surrendered. Mo turned to the young man, noting that he couldn't concentrate today, and asked if he was feeling unwell. At first, Rin hesitated to answer, although he started by saying that he was simply in such a strange state. Then the young man partially confessed, telling the truth, that his sleep had been greatly disturbed recently, which was the cause of the discoordination. Jong Wook, hearing that the young master was unwell, offered to join him and his brother to train. While working out, Jong said that the exercises are called reverse lift flow and additional pull flow, and they increase strength, and Nam added that you need to engage the lateral muscles, but make sure that the elbows are at the correct angle. Rin hurried away to avoid such a fate. So already drenched in sweat, he said that next time he would definitely join. The young man decided that now was the moment to tell everyone important information about their trip. Having finished training and saddled their horses, the warriors moved on, following the planned course. Here Rin decided to say that before they went to the Jeagle clan, he would like to look at the Seven Sages Mountain, which surprised Jong. The young gentleman told the team that after reading a book by a famous herbalist, he learned that there was a place on the mountain where one could easily find 100-year-old ginseng, as well as monkey wine, which is not so easy to find in the rest of Jianghu. The guys, hearing about the wine, greedily and loudly swallowed the saliva that was almost flowing out of their mouths. Rin immediately caught the brothers on the fact that he heard that they love alcohol so much that people call them rising drunken ghosts. The guys were a little embarrassed by this and, in order not to show it, agreed to accompany the master. But then, Master Yun responded. The teacher explained that the Seven Sages Mountain was located in a region close to demonic sects, and accordingly, an orthodox sect like the Tianzhong clan could cause trouble. Rin realized it instantly and said with fox eyes that the enemies would not know that they were from the Tianzhong clan if they did not talk about it. Mo was furious at this statement and shouted that it was inappropriate for the heir of the clan to speak about him so disrespectfully. The master wanted to say something else for the pride of the clan, but Rin, riding forward, asked if it was really that important. The young master explained that if they were to face opponents who asked where he was from, they would hear without hesitation that he was also from a demonic sect, and by doing so he made it clear to the team that survival was more important than pride. After thinking about the young man's words, Zhong asked teacher Mo why they, as an orthodox sect, should be afraid of demonic ones, and immediately after that expressed his opinion that he agreed with what the master said. Teacher Yun immediately asked if the boys were saying such things just to get their fill of monkey wine, and then silence fell, and the brothers turned away so as not to be caught. Rin suddenly closed his eyes, telling the master that he wanted to bring some ginseng for his beloved parents, to whom he had already caused so much trouble. Mo looked at this one-man show with suspicion and still agreed to go to the mountain. The young man rode forward again, exhaling heavily, and told everyone that they needed to stop at the nearest tavern. Rin rode forward so that no one would see the sly smile on his face and understand that he was lying. The guy lied about both the ginseng and the monkey wine, but he didn't lie about the fact that there was something important and 100 times more valuable on the mountain. The young master couldn't get the thought out of his head about the poisonous stone demon flower, which would play a very important role. The background story of the flower's origin is that all poisonous insects gathered in a certain tomb when it was time for them to die, and after centuries, all the poison from them collected in a puddle that hardened, forming a poison crystal. Nature is nature, and although very rarely, a seed could fall on the crystal from which a flower would sprout. The flower blooms right on the crystal, being saturated with its poison and demonic energy, which is where the plant gets its name. Rin knew very well that the flower should be on the Mountain of Sages, but there was one thing. Entering the tavern, the young man heard this but that the locals had already talked about, and it was about the fact that the martial arts masters of the demonic sects had gathered near the Mountain of the Seven Sages, but no one knew the explanation for this. One of the men quietly said that there was nothing surprising in their appearance there, since a medicine had been discovered that was useful for those who were members of demonic sects. Rin was shocked that these ordinary people managed to find out everything so quickly and spread these rumors. Teacher Mo immediately clarified the point that the gentleman had clearly heard about the direction that the demonic masters had taken and that it coincided with their path, and accordingly considered that going there was a bad idea. The guy sat over a cup of tea and thought that Yun was indeed right and that those masters would definitely fight for the flower. But a brilliant idea came to Yun's head that they didn't need to get into a fight, because there was another way out. Rin understood that the last one to receive the flower would be Gochok, which meant that he would simply need to defeat his heir to the Hubei Snake Dragon sect. The young man even knew that Gochok had reached the peak of the first level over the past 6 months, and this should be taken into account in the upcoming battle. At the same time, Rin was not going to give up and continued to think about the flower that would become the ingredient that would solve his problem, because the martial arts of the Qianzhong clan are still demonic. Without answering the master, the young man finished his tea and slammed the cup on the table a little louder than necessary. Yong looked closely at the girl and said that nothing in their plans had changed even after hearing this, and they were continuing to head for the Seven Sages Mountain, which left her in shock. Mo jumped up and, breaking into a scream, repeated once again that demonic masters would gather there, to which Rin calmly replied that this was one of the paths to the Jiggle clan. As an argument, the guy explained that one way or another a skirmish would occur since the path lay through the mountain anyway, so it would be good to meet the masters there. Yun could tell that she was holding on with all her might to not call the guy an idiot, so all she did was sigh heavily and lower her head. The master raised her head and expressed her consent to continue on their way, but at the same time warned that if they did meet those masters, they would need to avoid a skirmish. Rin decided to calm the teacher down by reminding him that if something happened, they had 2 rising ghostly blades. But unfortunately, this was absolutely not the kind of mention that should have been used now, because the ghostly blades were also dead drunk. Turning back to the master, the young man spread his arms out to the sides and made a sad face as if to say, "It happens to everyone." The young gentleman immediately assured the girl that she should not worry, since he personally promised not to approach those places where it would be dangerous. Yun, as always, reacted silently to such a statement, but took it into account so that later she would have something to poke her nose into. Approaching the hotel grounds, the young gentleman announced that they would be staying in this place for a while. Another interesting fact that Rin knew was that the area around the Seven Sages Mountain was similar to the Pandemonium Gallery, or a place where evil spirits gather. The young man admitted that he was still too weak to go to such a dangerous place, but he remembered that the one who laughs last wins. Before coming to this particular place to spend the night, Yang asked everyone to explore the taverns and bars of the Snake Dragon sect, and also find places where there are few customers but a lot of horses. Rin gave this task because Gochok is a young leader of the Snake Dragon sect, which means he will most likely fight with his own people. The guy asked to find out about the stables because Gochoku and his people would need to move quickly, which meant they would need a lot of horses. In addition to everything, even if Chalk gets the flower, he will not be able to use it right away. That is, he will look into the tavern before transporting it to a safe place. Having put all the puzzles together, Rin realized that Master Go would also go to the tavern that would belong to the sect of snake dragons, and here, he would have to catch up with him first and get the flower, because he was the one who got it in the past. The hotel was found, and now all that was left was to settle in here and wait for Go Chalk himself to come with the flower. It didn't take long for the necessary guests to arrive, which confirmed all of the young gentleman's guesses. From the hotel balcony, Rin and next to him, Jong Wook, were watching the newly arrived guests. Brother Nam Wook also came out to the guys to find out what or who they had been watching so closely for some time now. Instead of the master, Jong explained that down there was the same master who also came here for the flower. It was about Go Chok, who was also the head of the Snake Dragon sect, and he looked really dangerous. To the surprise of the brothers, young Master Yong cried out that this could not be, but they did not understand what had happened. But Rin realized that there was some kind of mistake here, because now Go should be on the mountain of the seven sages, but not in the hotel. The guy seemed to be heard by all sorts of deities, and one of his colleagues ran up to Go with some urgent news. The warrior was telling something to his master so that only he could hear the news without anyone else. Rin started to get nervous because the distance was too great to hear even a little of what they were saying. But Go himself made it clear with his facial expression that this news did not make him happy, but on the contrary made him angry. The master shouted something to his fighters that was again incomprehensible to the others, but one thing was clear. They all had to gather immediately. Finally, Yan was lucky, and even from the balcony he heard Chok shout to call the sword and the fighters of the 8 snake dragons, after which he gave the order to pursue someone. Zhong immediately explained to the master that the sword and the fighters were the 2 strongest forces of the snake dragon sect, and Guo was so excited about something that even he could make out the master's words. At that moment, Rin realized that if something urgent happened, he would have more opportunities to get the flower without risking his life, so he told the guys to get ready because they would go after the sect. Then, as if out of nowhere, Mo jumped out shouting that persecuting such a sect was too dangerous. The master once again tried to get through to the gentleman, asking why he was constantly trying to drag himself into increasingly dangerous situations each time. Rin walked up and calmly told the dragon sword flower that big changes were coming to Zhonghu soon, and that in order to survive in the chaos, they needed to become stronger. The young gentleman wanted to explain what this flower meant to him, but Mo, for the umpteenth time, started screaming. The teacher shouted that Zhonghu was at peace, and they were not such a weak clan that they could rely on some herb to support it. Rin sharply stated that this is where the master is mistaken, because they are so weak that she cannot even imagine. The young man asked directly whether the master really had no desire for strength, and immediately answered for her that naturally he did, because how could such a thing not be interesting to a martial arts teacher? Coming closer, Rin said that despite the interest in strength, the clan is unfortunately so weak that it cannot take part in the fight. Slightly veiled, Yong admitted that he had a dream of getting a flower to become stronger, to protect his clan family from any external threats. Being very close to the teacher, the guy said that if she really believed in him as the heir of the clan, then she just needed to follow his orders. Only now Mo looked differently at the one who previously could barely take care of himself, and now said what he said. The girl felt uneasy because she never once thought of the young master as an adult. Zhong laughed loudly, admitting that he had never expected to hear such a strong promise from the clan's heir. Folding their hands in a respectful gesture, Zhong and Nam informed the master that they were ready to follow the orders of the young clan leader. The teacher, still digesting what she heard from Rin, remained silent at first, but it was clear from her that the panic inside had subsided. Master Po folded her hands and bowed, joining in to follow the young master's will. At the same time, Yun asked Yong to remember that Zhonghu is not a place that can be treated so lightly. The young man nodded in agreement and understanding, and then told everyone that they were leaving right now to make it on time. Rin mentally asked Teacher Mo not to worry, because no one in all of Zhonghu knew what was happening better than he, as the one who had experienced everything himself. The fighters of the Snake Dragon sect moved out from the inn towards the mountain immediately after the order from their leader, Gochok. Following the demonic masters, Mr. Yong and his bodyguards in the form of Master Mo and the rising ghosts of Jongwook and Namwook set off. While the masters were climbing the mountain, spies were watching them from behind the bushes and trees, which from the outside looked more funny than dangerous. The team decided to look down from their hidden observation point and saw many fighters on the hill, although at first there were not that many of them. When Mo turned to the master, he immediately answered her question without even hearing it and explained that Gochok and the members of the Snake Dragon sect were forming an insurmountable network. Zhong, hearing about the network, looked out so sharply that everyone turned in his direction, thinking that it was an enemy, but the guy just anxiously asked if it was time for them to move out in that case. Rin smiled and said that they were not moving anywhere yet because the main squad was slow, and therefore he was sure that they intended to start acting as soon as they saw suspicious people or messengers with medicine. The young gentleman asked everyone to sit as quietly as possible, and so that they could not be seen and wait for the right moment. Some shouts were heard, and Yong immediately responded to them, but still did not give any instructions. The young man continued to watch, adhering to what he had told the team about holding out until the right moment. Rin voiced his suspicion that the soldiers had found a flower, so they should wait behind by the river, and at that moment Namu became curious about why exactly that place. The guy explained that a person running away would give more preference to water than to the forest. The water began to gurgle louder, but the screams, on the contrary, died down, and this was a sign to get ready. Rin crouched even lower into the thicket of bushes and asked the others to try to remain as hidden as possible. From the throat of the river and the dense forest, an ordinary man walked without strength and screamed for help. The man tried to cross the river while he could, but suddenly a huge palm appeared from which a purple glow emanated, and the poor man was torn to pieces, which left the team in shock. In the middle of the river, a whirlwind appeared, exactly the same color as the palm had been before, but now it shone even brighter. When the funnel settled, a man appeared in the middle of the water holding in his hand that same demonic flower of poisonous stone. Among the entire team, only Mo questioningly said into the air whether that person was really the flying demonic bloodlion. Rin immediately turned to the master and reported that he felt an ominous aura from the stranger, after which he asked if Yun was familiar with the bloodlion. Instead, Mo answered, explaining to young Master Yan that if he were to choose 100 demonic arts experts, Bloodlion would be among them. After observing Lev for some time, Rin concluded that, judging by the way he walked, he was not in the best condition. Immediately after the guy noticed the frail state of the demonic expert, he saw a flower in his hand. Yong realized that the plant was produced by Lev and not by Gochok, and this now meant only one thing. Literally, at the moment when Rin made a conclusion about what could happen, Go's army appeared and surrounded the bloodlion. The demonic expert did not react in any way to the appearance of the warriors, but at the same time, he did not move from his place. Gochok was also already here, and to the expert's face he concluded that he did not expect anything else from the flying demonic bloodlion, except that he came to the mountain and killed the most elite member of their sect. The lion laughed maliciously, saying that he would never have thought that he would end up in a trap of such weaklings as the people of Go. The expert croaked menacingly and said that if it weren't for the bastards from the Tang clan, he would have easily torn everyone to pieces. Gochok also turned to the bloody lion with malicious glee, put his hand under his clothes, and took out a silver tube, asking if he recognized what this thing was. Even being in such a high demonic status, Leo could not believe his eyes that he saw in the hands of the leader a weapon called a rain of 1,000 needles. The expert began to tell how the warrior had obtained such a rare thing, but he himself got ahead of him and said that he had spent a fortune to get it. All the clan fighters were armed with a shower of thousands of needles, so Go told Lev not to be deceived, since they had plenty of such goods. The expert did not give up or raise his hands or even retreat, but simply continued to stand in place. Bloodlion also had his own advantage in the form of a flower, so he gritted his teeth and got angry and raised water as a protective barrier, and then shouted at Guo. Does he really believe that a great master would kneel before such a weak weapon? Immediately after Bloodlion's words, Gochok gave a loud order to open fire and bright flashes appeared with the shots. The demonic master stood in the water and looked up at where the hot needles were flying at him and was ready to fight off the attack. With one movement of his hands, the Bloodlion used the water to his advantage while supplementing his power with the aura of the flower. The column of water rose to the level of the tall building, and the water acquired the same glow as the master's aura. The needles from the weapon shattered into pieces against the water wall, but if it weren't for the power of the flower and Leo's skill, the sharp iron would have pierced the water and he would have died instantly. Rin's team watched from the sidelines as what was happening on the river and how the warriors could do nothing about the water column. The young man looked at the bloodlion's strength and tried to understand whether he was thinking correctly about what it meant. The next moment, the silhouette of a demonic master appeared on top of the water column. Gochoku and his men had to rely on the bloodlion's chi, and the leader didn't understand where he got so much of it from. When the water fell down, Go noticed how the lion jumped from the water column and flew over their heads. The master laughed as he flew, calling the warriors fools who were nothing compared to him and his skills. The clan leader had no choice but to command the warriors of the second squad of snake dragons to open fire. Now the master found himself surrounded not by batsfo but by needles, and in the air he was unable to create any barrier for protection. The expert screamed in pain as the needles cut his body and he began to fall from a height down. The warrior took out his sword and shouted that the bloodlion had fallen as soon as he was back in the water. Gochok called upon the eighth sword and the snake dragon blades to kill the demon master and obtain the miraculous cure. The warriors began to carry out the leader's order with lightning speed, swooping down on the master like vultures. The lion coughed and wheezed like a wounded animal, but at the same time, all pierced by needles, he rose up, telling Go that he would never find what he was looking for. Having waited for the right moment, the demonic master shouted to the fighters to come to him, even all at once, because right now he would take everyone with him to hell. Every movement of the bloodlion was like a blade, causing warriors to lose half of their heads or parts of their bodies in mid-flight. Of the entire team, Mo and Yon continued to watch such a wild spectacle, but the ascending ghost could not watch such a thing, and Zhong almost threw up. Teacher Yun watched as the river water turned red and silently admitted that she had never seen such a bloody mess before. The most mysterious thing for Mo was that young Master Rin, as a newcomer to Jianghu, was now remaining calm while watching the ongoing massacre. One of the fighters shouted to everyone that Bloody Lion was dead, and he really did look that way after all the weapons that had hit his body. The master fell dead into the water, and the warriors continued to stand and wait for the order from the leader. Finally, Go was able to get closer and shouted to the fighters to search Lev immediately and let them know when they find the medicine. But the men, having examined the bloody expert from head to toe, informed Gochok that the flower was nowhere to be found. The commander-in-chief panicked when he heard this news, so he ordered to look for the flower better, because he had seen it personally, and when they were close during the chase, the scoundrel could not hide it anywhere else. While Guo shouted for the warriors to inspect every son, Rin asked his bodyguards to quietly follow him. Almost silently but quickly, the team followed the leader through the dense forest. In parallel with the movement, Yong explained to the guys that the bloody lion did not have the medicine, but he guessed where it could really be. Mo asked with some doubt if the young master was really so confident in what he was doing now. Rin replied that he was sure because most likely the demonic master probably sent the flower downstream. The young man reminded the team that Leo had created a water barrier, which was not really the best defense mechanism. Such a mechanism can block hidden weapons but obscures the view of enemies, and Lev had to dodge attacks with the help of Qinggong, and since he did this, Yong Owl explained that he was sure the master released the flower at that time. Rin's final conclusion was that the master would have to walk on water to find the cure. Kamana turned around for a moment as she heard the sound of gunshots from which needles were flying out. Yong warned everyone that they needed to speed up even more because soon the warriors would figure out where the flower might be. Downstream, Rin noticed a purple, poisonous glow coming from the water, confirming his guess. The guy immediately informed his team that he had found a flower, and it was indeed floating in the river. The young man landed right next to the medicine, and the bodyguards landed on the shore after him. Rin took the flower in his hands and for a while simply looked at it, trying to understand the sensations of its power. Time was running out, so Yong informed the team that he needed literally a second for one very important matter and reached his hand under his clothes. Rin gave Zhong a box asking him to hold it, and then took out a flask with a liquid the color of which resembled a poisonous flower, and something similar was growing on a bush nearby. The young man took a white flower and poured the substance from the flask onto it, and when the boys asked if this was really what they thought, Yong answered that yes, it was poison. The plant immediately began to look like what everyone was chasing, and now all that was left was to do the most important thing before anyone noticed anything. Mo decided to teach the young master a lesson, reminding him that an orthodox master should not carry poison with him. But Rin, on the contrary, told the teacher that poison is quite a useful tool. And after that, he put a fake flower in the box and said that now everyone will think that their target is inside. The young man showed Master Mo the box and said that it would deceive the clan, but not for long, but they would have enough time to escape. Zhong stretched sweetly, saying that it was easy because other fighters were ready to give their own lives in battle for this trifle. So he said that he doubted that the flower would go to them because they were only watching everyone. Yang looked at the box and told his friend that they really just got lucky this time. Rin looked at the guys and told them to get out of here when suddenly something or someone rushed past him like the wind, and the box disappeared from his hand. It turned out that the Bloody Lion himself rushed past the guy while he was looking at his empty hand. Absolutely everyone on the team froze in horror because they clearly saw how the fighters killed Lev and he fell into the water. Slipping past the team, Lev announced in an ominous voice that this important element was back in his hands. As soon as the demonic expert appeared near the guy, Mo immediately shouted for him to move away and rushed, because she knew that this would not end well. But Rin didn't have time to get his bearings because he was discouraged by the fact that what he saw with his own eyes as Go's warriors killed Lev did not match up with what he now appeared in front of him. Because the young man hesitated to even move away from the master, he dealt him a fatal blow. The bloody Rin flew into the thick of the forest as if he had not been hit, but launched from a catapult. The Blood Lion's blow was so strong that Yang flew far, breaking through a tree with his body and leaving a ditch in the ground. But his bodyguards immediately prepared to protect their master, even though he was already dead. The master, holding the flower, hissed furiously through his teeth that these rats are so greedy that they know no bounds to their impudence. While eating the flower, Leo maliciously concluded that he tried to devote as much time as possible to fully absorb its energy. Feeling saturated with power, the master growled fiercely that now that he had used the innate internal energy of Qi, he would personally kill everyone who stood in his way, tearing them to shreds. The lion twisted the funnel and shouted in a terrible voice that with the help of the spilled blood, he would be able to fill the missing amount of Qi. Mo looked at the eerie growing energy and understood that anything could happen, that this was the end of their journey. In the girl's eyes, one could read the fear that she could very well die now, no matter how much of a master she was. Yun held the sword in her hands, aimed at the enemy, but it was trembling just like her whole body. The teacher realized that this was the first time she had entered into a real fight with an opponent who possessed such overwhelming power. The most terrible moment for Mo was when she remembered how Lev chopped the fighters into pieces on the river. The girl imposed that terrible picture of the massacre on herself and realized that there was every chance that the same fate would await her. Yun's thoughts of death were driven away by the voice of one of his brothers, who said that since birth, he had never looked at his sleeping place with calm and serenity. The guy also noted that thanks to his dedication and work, he received the title of Ghostblade. They began to take in front of Master So, reminding themselves who they were, but she, except for reaching out to them in an attempt to stop them, could not even say a word. She was so scared. Zhong and Nam went forward at that moment, having already made an oath that from that moment on, as warriors of the Tianzhong clan, they would protect the younger head of the family and stop the occultist. Yun shouted after her brothers that they couldn't go to Leo because he was too dangerous. Hearing the heartbreaking cry of a frightened girl, the guys stopped and told us that this was their duty, that they had to fulfill. Turning slightly towards the master, the brother glanced at her furtively and reminded her that the bastard had swallowed not the flower that would give him Qi, but the one that would kill him. At first, Mo couldn't believe her ears, but she remembered how Rin dropped poison from a flask onto an ordinary flower, and it became the same as a real poisonous one, and then put it in a box. He explained to us that the old bastard, who was seriously wounded and had used up all his innate internal Qi energy, had also tasted poison, so if they could hold out and withstand the onslaught for some time, then there was every chance of victory. Now that Mo wasn't screaming or panicking, the brothers could calmly leave her and get on with important business. The guys even jokingly decided to compete over who would go into battle first with the old fart. Lev bared his teeth and said that it was quite commendable that the boys did not run away, but then he immediately released his power. The sword of one of the brothers touched the hand, but it was not part of the master's body, but its continuation in the form of energy. Shouting to the brats that their courage was senseless, the demonic expert broke the swords with his energy hands and then reached for the brothers' bodies. At the moment when the blood lion almost grabbed the guys, a loud voice was heard from Mo, who activated the Emperor Soaring Dragon Sword technique, thereby creating a shockwave. With the words lightning falling from the heights of heaven, the master pierced Leo's hand with his sword. Now that Yun was not scared but angry, her eyes and her gaze itself looked completely different. The lion went berserk and shouted at the masters that they were worthless creatures and rushed to finish them off. But the demonic expert immediately shut up after he felt that something was wrong with his body. Master Yun was able to strike Leo again, who this time knocked him back just like he had struck Rin. There was a distance between the young masters and the Blood Lion, which gave them some advantage in attack and defense. The demonic master began to cough up blood, not understanding what was happening to him because he was not critically wounded. At the same time, Leo looked at his hand and, based on the sensations in his body, realized that the flower he had eaten was completely wrong. The expert couldn't believe that he was attacked by an old monster of the Tang clan, and began to convince himself that if it was the poison of the Tang clan, his organs would have already melted and he would have fallen dead. Leo raised his head and looked in front of him, where the three young masters stood, still ready to defend themselves and Mr. Yong. The bastard's teeth gnashed and he screamed, "How dare those worthless creatures commit such a mean act against the senior master?" The master threatened the brats that he would break all their bones and immediately bent over, coughing from pain and bleeding. Mo carefully watched the enemy and was convinced of what her brothers had told her about the effect of the poison in his body, which was now visible by his loss of strength. The teacher realized that Lev didn't have much time left, but for that they needed to hold out for a little while longer. The eerie laughter of the demonic master pierced the girl with cold, and she again did not understand what was happening. The lion stood and laughed evilly, saying nothing more, and this knocked out of action everything that the fighters were focused on. Bloody Lion's laughter became louder and louder, and he already grabbed his head from the current situation. Abruptly stopping the performance, the master asked again about what the scoundrels had told him, that this place would become his grave. The lion grabbed his head with both hands, horrified that even if he died, it would not be at the hands of the old monster of the Tang clan, or from the swords of the devils of the Snake Dragon clan, but at the hands of small fry whose names he did not even know. Already looking more like a madman than a master, Lev looked towards the young masters and shouted, "Is this even possible?" And then he asked that the bastard he killed first had an elixir. The master headed in the direction where Rin had fallen, telling everyone that if the elixir was still with that bastard, he would take it away, and if he had managed to drink it, he would rip open his stomach and squeeze everything out along with the blood. Leo ran up and rushed at the three bodyguards, and all Mo managed to do was shout that the enemy was attacking. When the demonic master threw Nam aside, Yun immediately stood up for the guy and did not let Lev go any further. As much as possible, Mo used all the strength of herself and her sword, while Lev activated the lightning strike technique. The blow fell on Zhong, who also rushed to help the dragon sword flower. Zhong got hit in the face harder than ever before in all his training, of which there were many. The same thing happened to the big guy as to Rin, because after the blow, he also flew far from the battle site. Next in line was Mo, to whom the demonic master's hand was already reaching out, and a pair of purple eyes were looking angrily. Even knowing that she couldn't dodge, Yun didn't allow fear to appear in her eyes, but armed herself only with rage. Lev's hand never reached Mo because Rin flashed between them like lightning, cutting off the old devil's hand. The young master was able to use the old man's rather dangerous energy to save his people. If you look through Rin's eyes at how Lev hit him and he flew into the forest, you can see that the young man did not fall dead. At the same time, having broken more than one tree, Yona was so battered that she was sitting only thanks to the fact that there was a part of a tree pole behind her. The youth was even able to reflect on the fact that he had not expected an attack from a flying demonic blood lion with true chi at all. With his mind, Rin commanded his body to stand up and as quickly as possible, but it didn't obey him because of the damage. It was not surprising that the boy's body parts could not move because they either had very deep wounds or broken bones. At that difficult moment for himself, Yong remembered how he and his team went after the Snake Dragon clan from the hotel and realized that in the world of Murim, there was not a single person who knew more about what was happening than him. The young gentleman turned to himself with reproach that he thought he knew everything, and therefore he had raised his nose too high, and this is what it led to. At some point, Rin was shocked that blood began to flow from his forehead, although before that nothing had flowed anywhere. Touching his forehead with his hand, the guy felt something similar to what he had once done to himself by smashing his head against a statue. The next moment, Rin watched as his blood began to crawl or fly in small streams somewhere up and past him. Along with the blood, the young man heard an ominous whisper that called on him to surrender, and the next words were in order to immediately give up his body, and Yong realized what was starting to happen again. Rin felt something awaken inside him, but he didn't notice how the hands of red aura began to appear behind him. Inside the boy, the destructive aura of the old man he saw before the regression awakened again. Yong remembered that he had already used the Demon Lord's energy when he fought in the first duel with Mo. The young master thought that if he managed to use the aura this time, he would be able to defeat Leo, And behind him, meanwhile, the voice howled louder and louder and more hands appeared. The aura, like smoke, began to penetrate the guy's body through his mouth, and he felt how it was trying to take control of his body. Being in such a weak state, Rin even began to close his eyes, to which the energy was also approaching. The red haze sucked in the body that the demon lord needed more and more like a quagmire. But as soon as Yon thought about closing his eyes and then being subject to the aura again, he clenched his teeth as hard as he could. The young man's eyes opened wide like those of an animal that does not want to live in a cage but longs for freedom. The guy told himself to wake up right now and ordered not to fall for such talk, after which he began to pull himself out of the red bonds. The old man's voice whispered terribly to give up the body, to which Rin shouted at the bastard to close his mouth right now. The young man, forgetting about how many open wounds he had and how his limbs were broken, growled menacingly at the demonic master that this body belonged only to him, Yan Hua Rin. Rising from the ground, Rin clenched his teeth and told the old man that the body would never belong to him, period. In order for the demon lord to know his place, Rin pointed out that he was just a ghost of the past and nothing more. Having overcome the physical barrier, Yang shouted that next time he would definitely protect all his loved ones. Taking 7 league strides, the guy returned to the river along the ditch he had made. Rin made a jump from the place where he had just recently been lying barely alive in order to immediately fulfill his promise to protect his loved ones. The young master then arrived in time to the bloody lion, and with one movement cut off the hand of the bastard who was reaching for Mo. The demonic expert, just in case, quickly distanced himself from the young masters so that they wouldn't cut off anything else from him. Splashing his blood left and right, Lev was so angry at the brat that the veins on his face showed through and it seemed like they were about to burst. In an instant, the master suddenly fell silent as if he saw in front of him not a guy, but a ghost. But in fact, this was really so because the strong warrior felt the aura of another who was in the body of a young man. Bleeding out, Lev didn't even notice the wound, but instead he pointed his hand at Rin in horror and asked how he could have such a powerful aura. But the master found it difficult to even speak, so he started coughing. Yun also looked at the young master and noticed how his energy was glowing, and in it she recognized the one that had manifested itself during their first duel. The Vuk brothers could barely stand on their feet after being beaten by Leo, and when they got closer to Teacher Yun and Mr. Yong, they were very happy that he appeared in time. Having become a strong wall, Mo warned Rin that some time had already passed since Lev was poisoned, and due to the fact that he had used the chi of true origin from the very beginning, thinking that he had eaten the right flower, he had thus exhausted himself faster. Looking at the demonic master, Yun quietly but confidently said that he would soon die on his own, even without any effort on their part. Rin, without taking his eyes off the enemy, asked the team to listen to him carefully now, and said that this would be his first order. Having endowed his sword with an aura, Yong asked absolutely everyone, without exception, to immediately start saving themselves, thereby showing that he would remain to distract Lev. There was silence from the team at the order, but Rin and the demonic master met each other's eyes. The lion looked at the sky very serenely, saying that he had experienced a lot and witnessed many strange things in the world of Mirim. But immediately after some nostalgia, the devil looked at the guy again and said that even after what was already behind him, this incident now does not make any sense. The boys stood ready and did not leave after the master's order, until the master tried to say something loudly but coughed again. Breathing heavily, Lev still managed to shout to the young masters with a warning that he would now abandon the idea of returning alive. The team did not respond to the master's words and did not even react in any way, but simply steadfastly continued to hold the defense. Lev activated his energy with his remaining hand and directed it at the brats, which was surprising given the old man's weak state. Raising the water, the demonic master told the young man that he had no idea how he would be able to use his power, but it would be better for him to fight at full power. And at that moment, all 4 were ready to attack as one. As 2 strong waves went towards each other, so 4 rushed towards one who had no weapon except his chi. Gochok made his way through the thick forest shouting, "Creature!" cursing the old man for going so far as to use true origin chi. A river was visible not far away and Go sped up to catch Leo. The leader jumped off the cliff, fully confident that he would fall into the water, but was horrified when he saw what was under his feet. Instead of water, the warrior saw dry, cracked earth that was still emitting steam, indicating that there had literally just been water here. Go was distracted from contemplating the catastrophe by the cry of one of the fighters, who informed the master that he had found Lev. When the leader ran up to the warriors, he saw the body of the demonic master without one arm and heard the conclusion that he was dead. But Gochok was not very interested in the old fart, and the first thing he asked the warriors was where the flower was. The fighter had just started to say something hesitantly when Go burst into a scream, telling the guy that if he said there was no medicine, his head would fly off his shoulders right now. The young man heard his sentence but still said that the flower really wasn't there, and with a cry from Go that the bastard fighter swung his sword at him. All the guy did was cover his head with his hands and prepare to die. But there were no sensations, and the fighter, just in case, decided to try to raise his head to at least understand whether he had died or not. And when he saw the leader, who was almost steaming from his ears, he realized that he was alive. Having hidden his weapon, Chok began to nervously walk back and forth to himself, mentally asking the question who this person was. The leader looked at the result of someone's power and wanted to know what kind of bastard it was that was able to kill the blood lion. But most of all, Go wanted to understand who was so confident in himself that he dared to get the elixir. Considering that the team had saddled their horses and was already far from the scene of the incident, it was unlikely that Go would have caught up with them on his own 2 feet. Despite his injuries and one open eye, Zhong was pleased that they had defeated the flying demonic blood lion. Sitting on her horse next to the brothers, Mo asked what exactly Zhong meant when he said he didn't believe it. The guy explained that if Leo had held out for another moment, they would all have met their death right on that mountain. Zhong's smile was replaced by sadness and fear that they were damn close to death, and he immediately restrained himself with the thought that it was not for nothing that they say that the strongest survives. The rising ghost also added that no matter how you look at it, Leo was just one of many other Jianghu warriors, and knowing this very well, he did not abandon everything and get involved in the fight. At the moment when Zhong finished thinking out loud, a young gentleman nearby started coughing, and not just a cough, but blood. Mo didn't stop, but she asked if everything was okay with Rin, although she herself saw that it wasn't. Instead of describing his condition, Yong told Yun that she was right, in that the world of Jianghu was not as simple as it seemed, which confirmed that no one would have thought that he would ever fight and eventually kill Leo. After what he said to the master, Rin thought that it was really very risky, because at any moment one of them could die. There was just one but that kept the young man and his team afloat throughout the battle, and that was the promise to protect the family and clan from any threat, which was not empty words. Rin grabbed Mo's clothes, feeling the pain growing stronger, while continuing to talk about how no one had promised an easy journey, and therefore dangerous situations like the previous one could not be avoided in the future. Yong asked Master Mo and the Rising Ghost to be prepared to become stronger, to which Zhong asked if that was possible. But Rin didn't answer the question because Yun butted into the conversation asking the young master if he wanted to explain anything to them, and he didn't understand anything. Turning to the sly young man, the teacher asked an even more specific question about what that ominous aura was for the umpteenth time. Zhong also remembered the master how he noticed the emission of aura during the battle with Leo. The guy explained that he clearly felt that the aura was not similar to the one that the Tianzhong clan has, but rather it resembled the power of that very lion, that is, sinister energy. Yun immediately turned to Rin in horror and shouted that he had mastered some kind of demonic technique, to which the guy was slightly stupefied. Rin had a moment to think about his answer, and he realized that if he told the truth, he would have to give out information about the regression, but because of this, the future would change. The young gentleman decided that now was not the time, and after that he replied that he would tell the team about everything a little later. Mo shouted again that they were all risking their lives now and the master was also trying to hide something from them. Instead of answering, the master felt her shoulder become warmer and noticed blood pouring out. The girl turned to the guy questioningly, but he felt so bad, blood was flowing from his mouth, that at first he couldn't even answer anything. Gathering his strength, Yong smiled tenderly, agreeing that everyone really was taking a risk. So when the time came to find out about the aura, the team would hear about everything first. Then everyone rode on in silence, hearing that they would be informed about what this ominous aura was and where it came from. Rin started coughing even more, causing Mo to gesture to Zhong that they needed to stop. The teacher got off her horse, and since the young master's condition left much to be desired, she asked if they could go to the Jago clan right now for help. The guy immediately responded to such a statement and refused because Gochok and his sect continue to search for them. And if they go to the Jigo clan now, it will develop into an inter-clan conflict. Mount Wudang was visible in the distance, and Rin said that they were heading there because he had heard that there was a talented healer there. Mount Wudang was shrouded in clouds, but there were also no fewer dense forests on it, which is why the air humidity was high since the sun could not penetrate with its rays everywhere. Something quite nimble flew along the forest path so quickly that it seemed like lightning itself. But the lightning turned out to be a white, nimble cat who was not only quite fast, but also knew how to jump high. The local boy could barely keep up with his pet, so he ran and shouted Baksul, trying to explain to the cat that it was dangerous to walk on the mountain by himself. The cat pretended to hear his owner and even sat for a while and waited for him to come, but as soon as that happened, the fluffy one ran away again. The cat approached the bush, the smell of which interested him very much, and while the owner was running, he had the opportunity to explore everything nearby. The little animal first looked up, and when he saw something that the boy couldn't see, his fur stood on end. The cat remained standing in place, even when the owner arrived, and the bush even began to move, but the guy did not notice it. The young man was glad that he was able to grab his pet, and happily said that he was finally caught. But the cat still did not take his eyes off the bush. Only when the bush spoke in a voice as if it was difficult for it to move did the boy pay attention to it. The young man watched as 4 strangers crawled out of the bushes, making that strange sound. Rin was the first to reach out to the guy, happy that they had finally met a living person in the wilderness. But the young gentleman forgot to take into account that he was still covered in blood and pale, given his weak state. So it was not surprising that the boy screamed and the cat with him. The child's cry echoed throughout the home despite the fact that it was far from the meeting place. Rin was lying on the floor in a spacious room and was fast asleep considering how he was injured, and then the long journey in that condition to the mountain. It wasn't without another nightmare, only this time Yong jumped up cursing the bloody lion. The guy had multiple DJ view experiences when he was again lying in a place that looked like a hospital and was all bandaged. The young gentleman noticed and felt that his wounds had healed, which led him to the conclusion that he was in the right place. Having pushed the doors aside, the same boy whom the team had frightened in the forest appeared on the threshold. But now he was simply surprised that the gentleman had woken up. The young man explained to the patient that he had quite serious wounds, so he was brought here to a small hospital run by him and his grandfather. Sitting down next to the guest, the boy asked to wait literally a minute and the medicinal decoction would be ready, after which he immediately began to do what he had said. Rin very carefully asked the guy if his grandfather's name was by any chance Hey Doc Gon, and he confirmed that it was. The next question from the stranger was whether the young man's name was Hai Chul Ryong. If the boy was not surprised that the guest knew his grandfather's name, then when he heard that the traveler knew his name, he asked how he knew about it when he was here for the first time. But Chul didn't know who was in front of him, and Rin grabbed the fabric of the blanket in his hand and restrained himself from blurting out what he felt at that moment, understanding why all the roads led him to Mount Wudang. While Chul continued to look at the gentleman, waiting for an answer, Yan was thinking in his head that he had found the right person, and everything happened for the sake of this boy. Remembering his past incarnation, Rin realized that before him was the very key to perfecting the inferior martial art of Tianzhong and the future strongest warrior of all of Jianghu. A talented little boy of an ordinary grandfather who is a healer will one day become the only ruler of the universe, Hai Chul Ryong. The heir of the clan leader remembered that before he returned to the past, the longest battle for a secret manuscript had unfolded in the world of martial arts. In that battle of the greatest scale, not only the 5 great clans of the martial arts world took part, but also the forces of righteousness and darkness. The manuscript turned the world of fighting upside down, giving the warrior the ability to demonstrate superhuman strength by combining good and evil in his body. The secret scripture became known as the last revelation of Zhang Sanfeng, who was the founder of Wudang and the Ascended Saint, and was given the name Canon of the Mysterious Heavenly Tao of Taiji. Rin felt like some kind of seer, because he knew that Kul was a top-level master in his past life, despite the fact that the family found him by accident while collecting medicinal herbs. Thanks to the manuscript, an ordinary man became the strongest warrior in the world, whom everyone, young and old, knew. Now Yong was thinking about how he needed to obtain the canon of the mysterious heavenly Tao Taiji in order to solve his clan's long-standing problem. Meanwhile, Chal continued to prepare the broth without being distracted by the master, since he had been taught to do his job well. Yong didn't take his eyes off the baby because he saw in him the future strongest master, and to some extent it was hard to believe now. Looking down at the floor, Rin thought about how he had imagined their meeting to be more dramatic. A fly landed right on the boy's face, and at first he simply turned his gaze to it without moving. Chal, continuing to prepare the medicine, caught a fly with his hand with one deft movement, and Rin managed to see it. The young gentleman did not hide his surprise at what he had just seen. In addition to his wide eyes, Yan said that such a movement could only be done by someone who had studied martial arts. And Chul, continuing to hold his hand, looked at the master, but remained silent. A second later, when the guy realized that the guest had noticed his skills, he came to his senses and said that yes, he really did study martial arts, and his grandfather taught him this. Rin was confused and couldn't understand how this happened, and just at that moment, Master Hadokgan passed by. The old man asked the young master with a smile how he was feeling, but Young was taken aback when he saw the senior master. Rin looked at his grandfather, who didn't give any indication that he raised the greatest warrior in history. When Rin followed his grandfather, he saw that his loyal bodyguards were already waiting for him at the house. The master saw that the rising ghosts were rewound in many places, indicating serious injuries, but Zhong still rejoiced and waved to the master, greeting him. Yang approached his team and then turned to Master He Gon, introducing himself with his full name and saying that he was from the Tianzhong clan, which was in Hanam like his people, and also thanked the old man for saving them. The old man laughed out of embarrassment and asked not to invent stupid things because his job is to treat people, that's all. But Master Doc noticed what the boy said about the Tianzhong clan and couldn't believe how the young people ended up so far from home. Judging by Rin's face, he clearly didn't expect to hear such a question, so he hesitated a little and the team behind him fell silent. Smiling broadly, the young man answered the partial truth that they were looking for wild ginseng. Mr. He asked again, puzzled about ginseng, and explained that although they only deal with herbs here, they are aware that ginseng is not something people just look for. Looking closely into the young man's eyes, Master Doc asked why he needed such a rare herb. Rin realized that now was the time to tell his heart-wrenching story. Washing his own tears, Yang admitted that in fact his mother was seriously ill, and his parents had always taken care of him until the illness passed, which is why the boy decided to thank his parents for allowing him to travel. Covering his eyes with his hand, the young man in all his glory added drama and told the old man that he did not know what to do because he had heard that his mother had become very ill, so she had gone to bed and her only salvation was ginseng. Wiping away large tears, Rin said that while climbing Mount Wudong in search of medicine, he slipped and then couldn't speak because everything was already clear. Mo already reached out her hand to ask what the hell the guy was making up, if before leaving the lady felt great and did not understand why he was lying. Imagine the teacher's surprise when she looked behind the gentleman's back and saw how the grandfather was moved by his story and also stood and cried, which meant the story worked. Zhong also couldn't help but open his mouth in shock as Master Doc called Rin a true example of filial piety and added that he was surprised by such concern for his parents. The old man rushed towards the house, forgetting that he was no longer 20, and shouted for everyone to wait for him because he would go look for ginseng with them. When Doc disappeared from sight, Rin finally opened his eyes a little and was very pleased with himself. But the team stood behind, confused about what kind of one-man show this was. While in the forest, Mo wiped the sweat from her face and thought that she was sure that the young master had lied about searching for a cure. But considering how Rin looked under every stone and rummaged through the bushes, the story about searching for ginseng became plausible. Yong noticed how the girl stopped searching and, lying on the ground near the stone, told her that it was necessary to return to the search and not stand still. The young man said that they needed to find ginseng as quickly as possible, but he almost misspoke and almost said cannon. The bodyguards immediately responded that they were already starting and dispersed in different directions on the orders of the young leader. The sun was setting behind the mountains adjacent to Udon, and at that time it was already difficult to look for anything. Master Doc informed the team that unfortunately they had to end their search for today as it could be dangerous. The appearance of the fighters spoke for itself that they agreed with the old man's statement because it seemed that the leaves were already everywhere and not just on their heads. Once back at home, everyone slowly wandered off to their rooms. Rin, wiping the sweat from his face, also realized that although he hadn't really counted on ginseng, it was a shame to spend so much time and effort, and he also realized that even knowing the future, nothing is easy to get. Master Doc decided to offer the young man his help in the form of sending him medicine, and asked him again if he remembered correctly that he was from the Tianzhong clan in Hanam. Rin folded his hands in a respectful gesture and bowed, saying that he would be immensely grateful for the help provided. But when the boy turned to the mountain and looked at how the sun had almost set, he asked the old man for forgiveness. Bowing again, Rin asked if the master would mind if he and his team stayed in this place for a couple more days to find ginseng. The doctor did not object to the guest's presence, so Rin sat on the floor in his room and immersed himself in meditation to better control the demon lord's aura. It was quiet around, So the guy was left alone with his thoughts about the fact that now he knows where Hae-dok-gon often goes, and if he tries to search there further, he might be able to find a clue related to the manuscript. The young man understood that they were incredibly lucky because if they had started searching on their own, it would have taken more than 1 year of their lives. The first thing Rin saw in the morning when he left the room was the master laying out the medicine to dry. Mr. He also noticed the guest and nodded in response when he came up to bow and say good morning. The men sat on the steps of the house and looked at nature in silence, without disturbing the true sounds with words. After some time, the old man asked if the young man would go to the mountains with him again today. But Rin replied that he would like to try to search on his own today and Grandpa didn't mind. Yong sat looking at the area and couldn't understand what he was still missing to complete the picture. Turning to the master, Rin asked where Chul had gone, to which Mr. Doc found it difficult to answer. Instead of the old man, the kid himself answered Rin's question, running past them holding Peck in his arms. The boy noticed the men, but he didn't look like he was playing with a cat, but rather looked like he was scared. Grandfather immediately asked the kid what was wrong because he looked like he had met a tiger, all disheveled and out of breath. Chal explained that during his morning hunt with Beck, some people in the forest tried to catch the animal, and they had to run away. Master, he explained to Rin that sometimes warriors who climb the mountain and see Saul try to catch him, mistaking him for a magical spirit. At the entrance to the territory appeared the same crowd from which the boy ran away, and there were a decent number of people there. The girl was the first to speak, saying that the boy was very playful for a child, and when she asked if the cat belonged to him, she didn't wait for an answer and immediately offered to sell it. Chul boldly declared to the stranger that Baek Sol was not for sale no matter what she offered him. The girl looked slyly, not believing the boy's words, and still said that she could give him a lot of money. The kid still screamed that he wouldn't give up his pet for any amount of money, and bodyguards even came out to hear this scream. The most interesting thing was that two strong sides met without paying much attention to the boy who carefully stepped aside. Master Doc immediately asked the young lady for forgiveness and explained that the cat was a member of their family and therefore they could neither give him away nor sell him. The girl indignantly said that anyone else would have taken the cat by force, so it is worth taking into account that everyone is very lucky and it is better not to catch her eye again. Rin watched the lady swear and immediately thought how impudent she was, but he couldn't remember who she reminded him of. The young man saw in the indignant lady himself from his past life, when he also quarreled with people with or without reason. Standing before the master to defend him, Rin told the girl that it was not good to ask for something that people did not want to give. Yon was not given the opportunity to come closer by the lady's bodyguards, who held out their sword and shouted, "Not a step further," and also asked if the ragamuffin even knew who was standing in front of him. The guy directly, without shame or fear, asked who they all were to threaten him, thereby showing that he would not allow himself to be humiliated. The warrior introduced everyone as the protectors of the Jeagle family, and the young lady as the youngest daughter of the head of the family. Rin was stunned at that moment because he was supposedly heading towards this clan. That is, Yon was looking at Jaegol Yohei's sister, his betrothed Jaegol Jongyeon, with whom he became related even before birth. Considering the fact that a representative of the Jaegol clan stood in front of Rin, he understood why even the most ordinary bodyguard had his tail spread so much. The guy acted wiser, and instead of also looking down on the guests, he greeted them by saying that he was very pleased to meet the daughter of the Jeagle family. That same bodyguard who was itching to punch the brat muttered through his teeth, "Who the hell is Rin?" Instead of the young gentleman's answer, the loud footsteps of one of his bodyguards were heard, who was walking towards the upstart from the Jeagle clan, saying that he was already fed up with this attitude. So far, the two thugs have only clashed with looks and words, and Jung was the first to start asking the big guy if he was too cocky for an ordinary bodyguard. The first touch of foreheads had already happened, and Jung was ready to proudly say that they were actually also from a famous clan in Hanam, but Rin interrupted him in his further words. Mr. Yong said enough, and the two bulls walked away from each other, after which the young man said that they were ordinary travelers who decided to visit Mount Wudong. Just in case, so that there would be no more clashes, Rin went forward again and stood in front of Jong. Young Miss Jaegol Yo. He covered her face with a fan and then told the boy that she was not going to talk to someone who was hiding his origin. The lady approached Chul and said that she was now giving him a choice in his actions. Yo came close to the boy and said that either he gives up the cat or it will be taken away by force right now. The young lady reached out with her hand, but the boy moved away, and the cat pressed even closer to his owner and looked displeasedly at the pestering girl. While Yo was reaching for the little animal, The baby noticed from the side that Rin was trying to tell him something, and the cat was clearly ready to bite the pest. Yon used the encryption of the message and explained to the boy with gestures that he would distract the Yegal clan and that Chul needed to release the cat at that time so that it could escape. Chul quickly nodded his head, showing Rin that he understood everything, but he kept pressing the cat closer to him so that Yo wouldn't have time to grab him. Having coughed loudly, the young gentleman turned to the girl with the news that there was a third option that she had not taken into account. A very angry and irritated Mrs. Jagal turned to Rin as curiosity got the better of her and asked what this third option was. At that moment, Chal, without wasting a second, threw the cat up into the air and shouted at him to run away as fast as he could. Bexol was a little shocked by this turn of events, but considering that he is a very skilled cat, he could handle it. Like the wind, the cat ran into the forest in the blink of an eye, to which Yo only managed to scream, "No!" The little beast raged, shouting at Rin that it was all his fault, but the young man calmly endured the indignation. Yong even added with confidence that since the cat had now run away, the young lady could simply catch it, since this time the child would no longer be able to do anything to protect the animal. The lady's teeth were grinding from this abstruse upstart, but she still gave her people the order to catch the cat. Immediately after the command, the entire group of bodyguards disappeared from the scene, leaving behind only a dusty trail. The guys looked at each other, pointing up to show that everything worked perfectly, while Yo was almost steaming from his ears from the boiling. In the evening, the bodyguards returned with a pile of leaves on their heads, but without the most important catch. A crowd of strong men informed their mistress that they had failed the task and had lost the cat. Unable to contain her anger, Yo shouted as the warriors of the Jeagle clan were unable to cope with catching an ordinary cat, but the men tried to convince the lady that the cat was unusual because it was as fast as the wind, so they thought it was a spirit. In a rage, Mrs. Jagal turned around and went to her people, telling them that sooner or later the beast would return, which meant the warriors would catch it again. At that moment, Mo approached Rin and quietly said that in front of them was most likely Mrs. Jagal Yohi herself, who was the youngest daughter of the Jagal family. And this meant that they had angered the one who was called the Jagal Demoness because of her character. Master Yun also mentioned that despite her hot temper, the young lady is known for having surpassed the clan's geniuses by becoming the vice chief of the intelligence service. Taking Mo aside, Rin informed her that for now it would be better for them not to reveal which clan they were from. Yong confessed to the teacher that he had absolutely no idea what the young lady had in mind with her spontaneous visit. But at the same time, the guy reminded Yun that the most important thing for them was to continue what they came to the mountain for, namely, the search for a cure. Walking towards the house, Rin noticed how Chul was standing sadly looking at his empty hands and realized that he needed to approach him. Having lowered himself to the baby's eye level, Yon asked if he was worried about his cat, and Chul admitted that he was very worried. And then the young man stroked the young fighter on the head, assuring him that there was nothing to be afraid of, because his cat was very smart and fast, which meant those thick-headed big guys wouldn't catch him. Smiling, Rin reminded the boy that he himself knew very well how fast his Bexol was. Mo watched from the side as the young master consoled the boy and was once again convinced that with this journey he was changing more and more each time. In the evening, Master He carried 2 huge mugs of wine made from the best medicinal herbs to the Vuk brothers, thanking them for their help, and although the guys tried to pretend to be embarrassed and modest, saying that they shouldn't have done this, saliva was already flowing from their mouths. Grandfather smiled at the boys' modesty, but before he could even finish telling them that he still insisted that they treat themselves, 2 barrels disappeared from his hands. The brothers poured wine into themselves as if there was no dust, not even water from the word at all. It flowed to them as if into dry earth. Master Doc stood a little confused by such a greedy savoring of his wine, while Mo, from around the corner of the house, watched the behavior of the bodyguards. As soon as the boys drained the barrels, the grandfather rushed to the side, saying that he would bring more wine now, but Mo also went somewhere. Yun was taking an evening walk before going to bed when suddenly, along with the wind, some other sounds reached her. The master noticed that under the moonlight, Rin and Chul had a duel, literally using the sticks they could find on the ground. Teacher Yun noted that the baby was holding his stance as if he had studied martial arts. Chul was the first to attack in the duel, rushing towards the young master with a bamboo stick. Rin remained in place, waiting for the boy's blow, but he was not going to give in because he knew what he was capable of. Sure, Yong blocked the kid's attack and the bamboo stick flew back, but it was still a great try. Despite such a toy fight, Mo was surprised that this was the first time she had seen something like this from such a young talent. Yun admitted to herself that although Cool was a child, he behaved like a warrior who had clearly been trained, and the master was able to repel an attack from a bamboo sword with an ordinary stick the first time. The teacher realized that talents were growing at an unimaginable speed, but at the same time it seemed to her like something beyond imagination. In the morning, Rin was already outside, walking around the area and stretching sweetly after sleep. The guy couldn't miss the fact that Mrs. Jagal was already standing in front of him, and as always, she had a displeased look on her face. Rin noticed the lady's crossed arms gesture and was pleased that this was an indication of another failure in the search for the animal. The young man made an attempt and greeted the young lady by saying good morning to her, but there was nothing good in it for her. It was unclear to whom and what the young lady wanted to prove more, but baring her teeth and clenching her fist, she told Rin that sooner or later she would catch the cat and take it for herself. Yong knew that he was playing with fire, but he couldn't help but ask why, in that case, the lady wasn't looking for and catching the animal. Already more sad than angry, Yo reported that she had more important things to do at the moment, and again mentioned that she would definitely catch the cat next time. When the girl turned around and walked towards the exit, Rin waved after her with relief, wishing her a good journey. Everything would have been fine by now, but considering that Yo is the vice head of the intelligence service, she turned around and said that she didn't hear what clan the young man was from last time. Rin, falling for the fool, kindly repeated that they were from a small clan in Hanam, which the lady most likely had not even heard of. The girl again turned around irritably and walked away empty-handed, and it turns out that for the second time she was unable to catch even some information. Yong watched the crowd of people leave, noticing how furious the girl was and really hoped that when he arrived at the Jigo clan, he would not run into her. Meanwhile, Yo walked ahead of her bodyguards, realizing that everything she heard from this upstart was a lie down to the last word. The young lady was angry that the owner of such power was only a master from some unknown clan. Yo immediately noticed that both the guy and his companions had unusual strength for simple wanderers. The girl gave an order to her people that she needed any information about those wanderers, including what clan they were from and what martial arts they studied. The chief bodyguard immediately accepted his mistress's order and was ready to assign the others to the task. Rin's walks on Mount Udar continued, and although he looked at some new corner of it every day, he did not find what he was looking for. The young man saw everything he could think of regarding the picturesque nature of this area, but not a single hint of cannon. The young gentleman even searched in the water that came across him from time to time in the form of a small lake, but again, other than swimming, he was unable to do anything else. It even got to the point that Rin climbed a tree on the mountain from where he could see the dwelling of the healer Doc. Sighing heavily, Yong was sad that he had already searched absolutely every place on the mountain, but still had not found the main goal. The guy had to admit to himself that he couldn't search for cannon forever, because time was running out, and with it, that which he wanted to protect his family and clan from was approaching. Rin imagined that the sun would set again, and the search would still yield no results, which would mean spending another day in Master He's dwelling. Returning home, the young gentleman called his loyal friends and assistants for a conversation. Rin informed everyone that it was time for them to leave this place as soon as everyone was ready. The brothers were delighted that they would no longer be sitting idle, and Mo also said that in that case she would go and pack her things. While Rin continued to stand in place, someone ran towards him from the forest and quite quickly, which indicated some kind of news. Chal ran as fast as he could to the young master, asking for help before he even reached him. The kid was out of breath, but Yong still asked what happened, showing that he was ready to help no matter what. The boy cried huge tears, explaining that something had happened to Bek Sol, and that he might even be injured. To confirm his words, the baby immediately showed in his hands a piece of cat fur that was not white but dirty and bloody. This angered Rin because he realized that the warriors had resorted to cruel measures to catch the animal. Chal expressed his concern that the cat should have returned home a long time ago, but he is still not there, which means he was injured and is possibly lying dead somewhere. Rin turned towards the house in order to curb himself and his anger towards those donkeys who had so abused the animal. The first thing the young man asked Cole was if he knew about the Revere cat, but the boy did not understand what it was. Rin explained that Revere was the place where the baby first met his pet. Chal gathered up the courage and fortitude to stop crying and said that he knew such a place. Yong immediately stood up and went towards the forest, telling the kid that he would help, although at first he didn't even believe it. When Chul asked the guy again if he really would help, Rin replied that Bake Sol was his family, which meant that of course he would make every effort to find him. To make it faster, Yong took the boy on his back and sped up the search for the cat as much as he could. Despite the enormous speed, the boy managed to keep an eye on the road and show Rin where to turn. The boy sped up when the kid shouted that he needed to turn towards the cliff. Once they got closer to where the cat was found, the boys walked more slowly so as not to lose any possible traces of the animal. There was very little time left before the boys would reach the foot of the cliff, but Rin was still carrying the boy on his back. Just in case, the young man asked Chul if what they were looking for was down there, and he confirmed what he had said and wanted to get down. The boys walked around the cliff shouting the cat's name or simply calling him as they usually call such animals, but they did not hear any sounds in response. Suddenly, Chul emerged from the bush and called Rin to come quickly to him and look at what he had found. The boy cried again because he saw traces of his pet's blood and fur. The guy realized that if there were a lot of tracks here, it could indicate that Peck was somewhere nearby. The boys moved further away from the tracks that Chul had found and continued to shout the cat's name. Rin was very sad to see how scared the baby was for his pet, and he tried to console him by saying that it seemed to him that Peck was already very close, and then he really saw something suspicious. Behind the thick bushes there was a stone near the cliff that seemed to be blocking some kind of passage. To console the baby, Rin pointed out a boulder behind which there was most likely a cave, and Baek-sol was most likely hiding in it. Coming closer to the stone, Yon was ready to push it while Cheol stood to the side examining the find. Leaning against the rock, Rin confirmed his suspicions about the cave as he felt the wind being pulled behind the rock, and immediately told the boy about it. The next moment, the guy grabbed the almost smooth stone, telling the kid that he would now try to move it from its place. No matter how hard Rin tried, he couldn't move the cobblestone even a little, and he was already thinking about calling everyone for help. But Chul told the guy that behind the stone there was a small hole inside the rock. Yong couldn't help but say that the hole had clearly formed when he moved the stone, but he quickly lowered it to the ground to the boys, explaining that the hole had always been there. To say that Rin felt like a nobody at that moment is to say nothing. Having descended to the hole, Chul shared with the guy that he felt that Beck could be in such a place hidden from the hands and eyes of people. Yong immediately pointed out to the boy that it was too dangerous for him to climb there alone, so he climbed in himself and Chul did not object. I would like to believe that at that time, people were not yet aware of the fear of confined spaces because otherwise Rin would not have ended up in the cave. Walking deeper and deeper into the huge cave, the young man was surprised that he would never have even imagined that there was such a large space behind the stone. In the midst of the pitch darkness to which his eyes had already become accustomed, a bright source of light suddenly appeared, from which Rin at first even turned away. But curiosity was stronger, and the guy wanted to see where such a bright glow was coming from. And as it turned out, there were steps in front of him that led somewhere. At the top of the steps sat a man in meditation, and at first it was not clear whether he was alive or dead. When Rin realized where he had ended up, he froze just like the man above. The guy was revealed the canon of the mysterious heavenly Taiji Dao, which was the source of that light. Rin was both scared and couldn't believe who he was looking at right now, and that such a person was in this cave. And sitting in front of the young man was the immortal Zhang Sanfeng himself, in eternal meditation, hiding from the outside world. The first thing Yan thought was that Canon should be somewhere nearby, but instead he saw a bloodstain. The young man was incredibly happy to find Baek-sol, although wounded, alive. Rin looked from the master to the cat, trying to put one thing into another, but nothing really fit into his head except to quickly get the animal out of here and help him heal his wounds. Chul paced from side to side near the hole, completely exhausted from nerves and now also for Rin. Suddenly the boy heard some sounds from the hole that were getting closer and closer, and the first thing he asked was Baek-sol. First, something creepy and shaggy, unlike anything else, appeared from the tiny hole. Chul was frozen with fear, thinking that some evil spirit had been released in the cave and was now coming for him. But the baby let go when he saw the rest of the monster gradually crawling out of the hole. The baby couldn't hold back his tears when he saw what made his heart flutter and worry so much. Rin held the cat in his arms, smiling as he told the boy that his nimble, furry animal had been found, and he rushed to meet his friends. When Chul took Baek in his arms, he cried again because the poor guy was completely exhausted and covered in blood. Carrying his friend home in his arms, the baby could finally give vent to his feelings, which he had tried to contain while the search was ongoing. Rin turned away from the boy for a minute to stand by the rock, where he found what he had been looking for so long and so diligently. Finally, after so much time, the young master looked at the canon notes in his hand. At that moment, when Rin saw both the immortal master and Baek-sol in the cave, it was difficult for him to decide what to do. Gritting his teeth, The young man struggled with two strong desires inside him to finally find the cannon and help Chul and his family. Exhaling, Yong turned around and walked from the master to the cat, choosing a completely different target while the true one was right in front of him. Sitting down next to the cat, Rin gently stroked him and spoke to him, asking if he knew how worried Chul was about him. Despite the injuries, the cat purred, and Yong was glad that the wound was not very serious and could be cured. Continuing to pet and comfort the animal, Rin looked at Master Zhang Sanfeng and thought about what Baekseol might be his spirit pet. Carefully lifting the little animal, Yong decided that it was time to leave, since the poor baby was already waiting there. Just as Rin moved towards the exit, explaining to the cat that he needed to be patched up and that it was time for him to go home, the master behind him began to glow again. In addition to the bright light, something happened that the girl did not expect at all. The master's body began to crumble like dust. It was very difficult for the young man to believe what he saw, since he had literally just found this holy place. Rin rushed up the steps, even though he knew that he might not be able to do anything to stop the master from disappearing. Imagine the surprise of the guy when, having climbed the steps in the place of the master, he saw that very cannon of the mysterious heavenly Tao of Taiji. And so Rin, standing by the rock, looked at the cannon for some time and seemed to be saluting the master. The young man suddenly realized that if it weren't for the cat, he would never have found the manuscript in his life, and also that in his past life he would never have even thought of helping the boy. Looking at the serene sky, Rin realized what many had noticed about him long ago, and that these were the changes in him that he felt only now. Basking in the rays of the sun, Yong also realized that in the future there were still many things that needed to be changed. The young master did not forget that he had to prevent the destruction of the Tianzhong clan, and moreover, make it the best in Hanam. And no less important a task for the guy was to make sure that his family lived happily and did not know grief. The guy held the manuscript tightly in his hands and reminded himself of his own promise to change everything for the better now that he had such an opportunity. Baek was lying on the floor wrapped in a bandage, and Grandpa told Chul that he had done everything he could for him. Master Doc assured the boy that there was nothing life-threatening about the cat and that he would quickly recover. But the baby continued to cry over the poor thing, not believing that they could have treated him like that. When Rien left the room, bodyguards found him at the threshold and Mo stood in front of them, which did not bode well. The flower of the dragon sword was ready to become a dragon herself and incinerate the villain. But she stopped at simply asking where the gentleman had disappeared to. Rin asked for forgiveness for his sudden disappearance, but the matter was extremely important since part of the family was injured and lost. And only on this basis, Mo asked to warn next time about where the devil would carry the master. Mr. Yong informed the master that the task of finding the cat was completed, and at the same time what had been sought all this time was found, so it was time to go home, to which Yun said that the packing of things had long been finished. The teacher turned to Rin and said that he had found what he was looking for, and asked him to show her the medicine. But the young man replied that he had found something more valuable than ginseng without showing it. Mo tried again to ask what it was, because it turns out that this would be the second secret that the gentleman is not telling them. Only Rin avoided answering by saying in general terms that he had found the future itself. The gentleman went to get his things and the team remained standing in a stupor after such a loud response regarding the find. Already in his clothes, Rin approached the master, expressing his gratitude for his help and assuring him that he now owed him a lot. Chal looked at his friend with cat-like eyes and asked if he really needed to leave now. Rin, as always, sat down at the baby's eye level and, putting her hand under his clothes, said that she would now give him something as a keepsake. Yong handed the boy a talisman, explaining that if he suddenly needed help, he only had to come to Hanam to the Tianzhong clan. Chal couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful thing, and Rin earnestly asked him not to lose such an important thing, not because it was very expensive, but because he would still need it. Turning around to leave, the young gentleman said that they would definitely see each other again either here or in Hanam. When Rin was almost at the exit, the old man asked why he treated Chol Ryong so well. The grandfather reminded the young man that they were simple people who only collected herbs and treated people, but the gentleman stood up for them and helped them, even though he had arrived here for the first time. Rin was silent because he was thinking about the answer not only for the old man but also for himself. So Master Doc asked again why. The guy looked at Chul, who was embarrassedly tugging at his grandfather's clothes, asking him not to pester him with questions, since the man already wanted to go home. And Yon thought that at first it was only about the manuscript. For a moment, Rin was lost in memories of his younger years, which were so quickly wasted by illness, and how he sat watching nature and watering tea. In parallel with those pictures, those that were captured recently surfaced, as Cool sat with Beck and also observed everything around him. Finally, Yong replied that the baby was very similar to him at that age, when there was more serenity. The old man was surprised by this answer, but did not ask anything else, as if the master's words had told him a lot. The kid waved goodbye to the team again and asked Rin to come again, to which he waved back. Mo couldn't believe that the master gave the boy the jade amulet of their clan, which was incredibly valuable in every sense. But Rin smiled and answered the teacher that he had learned a lot from this kid despite his little experience. Saddling his horse, Yon added that Chil and his potential were much more valuable than any amulet. Rin once again had images before his eyes of himself sitting on the threshold of his room, pouring tea in the rays of the evening sun. Suddenly, the deathly silence was broken by someone's timid greeting from the gentleman. A girl ran up to the young man and began to bow so quickly that he did not even have time to look at her face. But she was already chattering about how from today on she would serve the master. The girl seemed to be very afraid and nervous. So shaking like an aspen leaf, she said that her name was Yunhua and swore to serve faithfully and truly. Rin's first impression of the girl was that she was a very timid mouse who would shake at every rustle and would be quite fussy. But stretching into a slight smile, the guy approved of the assistant's appearance and replied that he was glad to meet them. Because of these memories, Rin smiled, and now when they were all riding horses together and his face was shining, Mo asked what made the gentleman so happy, to which he laughed and asked if it was really that noticeable. Zhang asked that they were now heading to the Juggle family, to which the young man replied that they were heading home. Mo again raised her voice in confusion, reminding that they were talking first about one thing, then about Mount Wudang, and after the mountain, now home, and not to the Jiggle clan, where, by the way, the master's bride is. Rin, completely calm, replied that in his opinion it was still too early to visit the bride and the Jiggle clan itself. Zhang again insisted that maybe it was still worth visiting the clan and at least informing them about the recovery of the master, but Rin still said that they were going home, and when he wanted to continue, he felt something was wrong. There was something wrong with the smell of blood that everyone who was near Rin felt this time. Mo tracked down the place where the smell of dead flesh was strongest and showed where to go. In the clearing in the middle of the forest, there really were many dead bodies lying and pools of blood around them. The team was all shocked that everyone who died here was a warrior, judging by their uniform. Rin looked at the striped bodies and did not understand who could deal with the fighters so easily. Zhang immediately asked the master what they should do with the warriors since they were already here and found them. Rin informed everyone that they had no need to interfere in other people's affairs, so they just needed to continue their journey home. As instructed, the bodyguards turned around and rode away, turning a blind eye to all the unfortunate people lying under their feet, and only Yong remained behind. Mo noticed that Rin was not nearby, so she turned and addressed him questioningly. The young man froze in the same place, telling the team that unfortunately they couldn't just pass by, to which Mo asked what that meant. Rin's face darkened, and he told the guys that everyone lying here was the bodyguards of the Jiggle clan. And now, when the master showed his people, whose bodies were lying in the middle of the forest, they looked at them completely differently, and everyone came up with their own story about what could have happened here and why.